Have you ever had to think about cost?
I was never informed of the cost of any drug or any procedure I was given, which really makes me think about how masked these costs are.
Would you want to be thinking about cost while you're going through it, or is it better to just say, here are your treatment options, these are statistical outcomes, like pick one, and then we'll deal with it on the other side?
I think there's a kind of unspoken agreement among everyone that the insurance company or Medicare is going to pay. And if it's the government, that means our grandchildren are going to end up paying for all of this money. So yes, I guess to answer your question, I think it would be healthier to know what these things cost. On the other hand, I have to say as a patient, I was so traumatized, I'm not sure I could have taken that information in. I was thinking about your what it's worth, what's it worth title, and I was thinking that the American individualistic, optimistic response would be, well, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Life is worth it, whatever it takes. But whatever it takes will not cure my cancer. So I think this question changes when you have incurable cancer. It becomes a different question, which is, when is enough enough?
I remember when she said that, when is enough enough? I
don't know that we are ready to say there's one magic line.
Thrown back to this conversation that I'd had with Leonard Saltz, where he was saying that
we have to look at everything in terms of value.
You need to think deeply about the kind of life you want to live. It's not just about how many days, it's about what kind of days.
So if you told me that there was something that gave 72-day survival benefit, but it makes people feel nauseous for most of the time, is that worth it?
When we're trying to draw this line as a society, before we figure out what we're willing to pay, we have to think about what we are paying for.
Yeah, I don't think we know what.
For Susan, 6 years ago, she decided that she was going to get chemotherapy because, in part, it would be more time with her daughters.
Yeah.
And suddenly, it's worth it.
Yeah, but I think we're changed by the treatment, too.
For now, Susan's cancer is basically under control because she's on this new drug.
For 2 years and now a month, and I am counting.
Okay, fair.
I've been alive without a recurrence, without the cancer growing, by taking these pills every day. And I take them at home. They're not infused in the hospital through my veins. They're just pills. And it's made the last few years remarkably normal-like, the new normal.
Yeah.
But when these drugs stop working, and I've been told they will stop working, I'm not sure I would want to go back to chemotherapy. But I suspect I don't know until I get there.
Producer Molly Webster.
And now for the thank yous for that piece. We want to thank Stephen Hall, and we want to mention Susan Gubar's book called Memoir of a Debulked Woman.
And thanks also to Dr. Atul Gawande for all his help and his latest book.
Which is I really thought it was wonderful. It's called Being Mortal.
Yeah. And thanks also to Nikki Haynes.
And to Glenn Blomquist.
Radiolab will continue in a moment. This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, UFC president and a close friend of Donald Trump's, Dana White.
People can ask me about Donald Trump for the rest of my life, and I'll tell you all the great things that I love about this guy. What I'll be happy to be out of is politics. I don't want to talk about politics, whether they're his, Obama's, this guy, that guy, none of them.
That's the UFC's Dana White on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab, and today...
Well, we're still on the subject of worth, but this is a totally different take.
Yeah, and this comes from our producer, Matt Keelty.
So, next, a slightly different story about worth.
A story that rather than being about how much we value our own lives,
Okay.
it's about how much we value someone else's.
Right.
And it starts with BuzzFeed writer Gregory Johnson.
So, okay, maybe you should start with what has now become sort of the infamous wedding drone strike.
Right.
Was that sort of where it started for you?
Yeah, so this strike happens in a very rugged part of Yemen where there are no paved roads, no electricity, there's no running water.
It's Thursday morning,
December 12th, 2013. And
early that morning, in a small village,
a group of guys, roughly 50 to 60 people,
including a soon-to-be married man, pile into a bunch of cars, and they start driving.
This is the convoy, the wedding convoy.
Now, in the lead car of this convoy was this man. His name is Abdullah Mohammed Al-Taisi. We spoke to him through an interpreter in Yemen. And Abdullah told me it was his neighbor who was the groom to be married that day. And so they were all driving up to the bride's village. Abdullah said they got there a little before noon, ate lunch, recited wedding poems.
After lunch,
they grabbed the bride
and just a few of her bridal attendants, a few females,
and they started driving back to the groom's village for the actual wedding ceremony. Now, Abdullah said that ever since they'd left that morning, through lunch, all day long, they heard this humming,
this sort of metallic whirring, this metallic thumping overhead.
No one in the convoy could see it, but they knew what it was. A drone.
Same sound hearing all the day.
It's nothing new for people in rural parts of Yemen by this point. They don't think anything of it.
It's common to hear those sounds.
Yeah, it's usually heard there.
So, they keep driving.
Basically, if you can imagine it, they're sort of winding through these wadis, these desert, mountainous places.
The road, he said, is mountainous.
They're all strung out on this rutted out little dirt track.
11 cars, single file.
Finally, they reach this little clearing.
Up near the top of this cliff, where they all slowed down and started to bunch together. Because apparently, one of the cars had gotten a flat. Some guys got out, fixed it, got back in their cars. Then right at that moment,
the sound shifts. Somehow. And then the missiles start.
4 of them.
In quick succession. The shrapnel is just flying everywhere.
In a blink, it's over.
People are trying to figure out what has happened, all the screaming, there's fires that are burning.
And Abdullah, his car was torn up. He had shrapnel in his face.
2 wounds in his face, one in Yemen or Yasar, the right hand, left thigh, one on in the back.
And he says that once he saw there was smoke, his first thought was, "Where's my son?"
He was looking for his son.
His son was there. Yeah, a young man who'd been a few cars back from him.
So in the 4th car on convoys, and he was married with 2 boys and 1 daughter.
Abdullah said he could move, so he got out of his car and stumbled back toward the 4th car to find his son.
He said he found him just next to the car. Before just he died. تكلمت فيه أنت وياه. No, he didn't talk to him. Just he looked at him and just passed away.
So it turns out that there are 12 dead. And typically what happens in Yemen is that as soon as someone is killed, they're buried very, very shortly thereafter. What happens here is something different. The people in the convoy take the bodies of the dead and they take them back to Redda.
This big town near where the drone strike occurred.
There's a video I have.
That's what you're hearing, where you see some men take these 12 dead bodies.
And they line them up in the street on this bright blue tarp and they sort of wrap them in these cheap blankets. And so there's this huge crowd that just gathers around to stare at these dead bodies who are laid out in the street.
And at a certain point,
this very tiny, very leathery old Yemeni who's sort of holding on to the back of a pickup with one arm.
He stands over the dead,
sort of swaying over the bodies and just lecturing the crowd on what happened. He's just screaming at them, and so you can hear his voice start to go hoarse. screaming, an American drone killed these. It was a massacre. These people are on their way to a wedding. Why did this happen? Why were they killed?
Why did they target this convoy?
Well, according to the US government, they had received intel that on that day, in this convoy, was an Al Qaeda operative
Named Shawki al-Badani.
who apparently had been planning attacks against the US.
That's why they took the shot. And in fact, they say that he was wounded in this wedding convoy strike.
And do we have any reason to believe that?
I have no reason to believe it.
Greg spent weeks in Yemen talking to survivors of the drone strike.
Talked to people who were there. No one knows this guy.
Greg says the guy isn't really a member of either of the tribes that were involved in the wedding. And so to him,
It makes no sense that he would be there.
to him, this was a terrible mistake. But what really got me interested in Greg's reporting, which you can read on BuzzFeed.com, highly recommend it, is that he goes really deep into the question of like what the US did next. Because the question is like, what do you do in this case? How do you repair something like this when you have two totally different cultures with two different traditions? How do you find a way to try to make this right?
I don't think
Can you?
No.
I mean, historically, do soldiers have an obligation to repair the damage they do?
No, there's no obligation. But what's happened is we've actually created an obligation for ourselves.
In Americans have?
Yeah, this has a really long history. A history that's
You mean like legally?
yeah, a legal history.
Really?
And there's a great law professor at Yale.
What's his
And,
name?
His last name is Witt. It's John Witt.
That's me.
We ended up tracking down John Witt
Hi, Jed. How are you?
to talk about how the U.S. first started to try to right the wrongs in war.
So, what is the foundation story of all this?
That starts with General Pershing in World War I.
So, 1917, the Great War ramps up, so we start shipping young men over to Europe, specifically France. And in charge of these men was a man named John Jay.
Commander of American forces on the Western Front.
Stern man, handsome mustache, bit of a maverick.
General Pershing's nickname was Blackjack, and
When he first arrives in France with his troops, General Blackjack Pershing,
he's got this problem, which is that he has jeeps.
Built in America, shipped to France, and manned by our men.
So World War I is the first war in which the U.S. Is shipping a lot of automobiles
more than 100,000
for the soldiers to drive.
cars, trucks, jeeps,
And jeeps are really great. They get his men from one place to another,
from Paris to Amiens to, I don't know, Marseille.
but they also run into French farmers' chickens and cows, children, sometimes just the farmers themselves.
Were these random collisions, or were there no roads?
I'm gonna bet there was some of everything. Sometimes it was probably just ordinary car accidents, and sometimes, no doubt, a little French wine was involved.
So this is Pershing's problem. He's trying to run a war overseas.
And it wasn't any good for him to have grumpy civilians at his rear.
And so Pershing has an idea, which he actually borrows from the Brits, and that is he will use
Cash.
money to right our wrongs.
Well, and so he goes to Congress and begs for a statue. And Congress obliges really quickly. There's no sign this is a controversial thing.
But it was a genuinely new thing because for the first time in the history of war, as far as we could tell, you had a state compensating individuals. Usually it's state to state. Here you have state to individuals. And so the US government starts systematically paying money for the loss of a non-American life in war.
How much?
Geez, I don't know.
It's actually surprisingly hard to find documentation mentioning specific amounts, but whatever the amounts were, it seems to have worked. Pershing wrote in his biography that the swift and prompt settlement of claims had a great effect upon the people. So it seemed to work really well.
And is this, I mean, is the idea here that, like, this is what we would do with the drone strike victims we talked about, that we pay them money?
Well, it's a bit trickier than that, because the thing that Pershing got in World War I, it came with a catch.
And that is that there's a combat exclusion.
In case you just walked in, that's Gregory Johnson. And what he means is that this law Basically what it said is that we'll pay your claims if it didn't happen on the field of battle and it wasn't a combat situation. If it was combat and it was on the field of battle, then tough luck. That's just war.
So if U.S. soldiers were driving to a fight and they ran their car into somebody and they damaged that car or killed that person, those people would not be able to get compensation. Whereas if the U.S. soldiers were driving to a bar and got in an accident, they would be able to get compensation.
But the problem is, once we get into these counterinsurgency wars,
Civilians are suddenly in the middle of the fray.
Charges have been made that troops killed as many as 567 South Vietnamese civilians during a sweep.
this is in a way the story of modern warfare.
Air raid sirens are beginning to sound over Baghdad.
President Karzai says he's delivering his final warning to the U.S. after a U.S. airstrike accidentally killed more than a dozen mothers and children.
By the time we get to Afghanistan and Iraq, the fighting is happening in cities, so there's no difference really between the battlefield and where people live. And so the line between what's combat related and what's not combat related, it starts to get blurry.
And so in 2003 in Iraq, what happened was there were actually people lining up. You know, there were civilian military operations centers. People started lining up outside of these saying, my family has been harmed. I want help.
How many people do you remember?
If I had to guess, it was, maybe around 80 people or so.
That's a ton of people.
Yeah.
That's John Tracy. He was a military lawyer in Iraq in 2003. And before him, Marla Keenan.
I'm managing director of Center for Civilians in Conflict.
So when they came with a complaint, what sort is it? Like you ran over my chicken, or you knocked out my windows?
No. Much more serious.
I mean, I think of cluster bombs. During the shock and awe campaign, one of the types of bombs that we were using, or the Air Force was using, were what they call cluster munitions.
Basically, John says Air Force planes would fly over these targets and drop hundreds and hundreds of these tiny little
Bombs smaller than a Coke can.
and a lot of them would land in maybe a parking lot or a field, and they wouldn't explode.
So on a number of occasions, you'd have, mostly it was kids, right? Because the kids would see it and
They didn't know any better.
they would just run over and kick it. And then that's when it would explode.
That's when it would detonate.
Right.
Huh.
I had a lot of those, close to a dozen. And so that was a difficult one because, well, it's combat because the Air Force dropped it because they were, bombing the city.
Right.
But at the same time, days, weeks, even months have gone by and this thing is just sitting in the ground. Couldn't we say it's not combat?
And this was a real question that John had to ask his boss, and then his boss asked his boss.
They eventually sent the question up to the Army Claims Service and they said, no, it's combat.
Meaning they're not going to pay.
Basically, like, we are in an armed conflict, and this was an unfortunate incident, but an incident that happened during a lawful combat operation, and therefore, we're sorry. And that's basically it.
So I said no to a lot of people.
And so, like in World War I, with General Pershing, military officers, they started lobbying their bosses for an expanded system so they could start making more payments. And eventually the military does expand it. In fact, I talked to one of the military's top lawyers.
Brigadier General Richard C. Gross. I go by Rich. I'm the legal counsel to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And he told me that around 2006, paying out these kinds of condolence payments actually became sort of a key part of military strategy.
Absolutely.
Even had its own acronym.
MAWS, MAAWS. It's money as a weapons system, which, I'm not sure that title resonates with everybody, but
Interesting phrase, for sure.
yeah, exactly. But it's the idea that money can be used to win hearts and minds that help bring the population over.
And it just got me wondering, how much money makes a good weapon?
Well, I haven't, like, the U.S. military hasn't given me access to a database or anything like that, but through FOIAs and interviews, I've seen different numbers.
Marla says that in 2006, the ACLU filed a FOIA request and eventually got their hands on hundreds of claims files. And in those files, what you see are a bunch of different numbers, but one that comes up again and again.
$2,500.
$2,500 by and large.
Now, someone like John could have paid more, but that meant they'd have to run the claim up the chain of command.
Exactly.
So it was almost like there were these ceilings.
$2,500 for a life, $1,500 for property damage, and then eventually the property damage amount got raised to $2,500 as well. And like that didn't make any sense to me. That somebody could get so much for a Toyota Corolla, but you were just going to get the same amount for a lost life.
Like, I can't get over, I mean, 2,500 seems like just such a nominal amount. And the practicality of that money, of like, if you were to kill someone who is the breadwinner of a family, that $2,500 would
Right.
not be able to support this family in any way.
Right. But we're not actually trying to pay full compensation, right? Like, we're not trying to say, we think if this 20-year-old man had lived to be the average age in Afghanistan, that he, that it would have been $60,843, right? Like, that's not the thing.
Do you ever, we had people who were killed here in an attack.
The federal government is one step closer to cutting its first checks to families of those killed and injured on September 11th.
And those people have been compensated.
Mhm.
The levels of compensation to the New York victims is pretty high.
The range of payments for a death claim ranged anywhere from $250,000 to just under $7 million.
Do you notice that?
I do. I do. But
It is to a large degree comparing apples and oranges
That's General Gross again.
because you're talking about a legal system
where a country is paying their own victims.
versus condolences in an area where there's no legal obligation to make those payments in the first place.
So that's a very different type of monetary payment.
Well, yes and no. Essentially, it's a person's life. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that there's an empathy in the number that you come up with, in the amount that you pay for someone's life.
I totally get what you're saying. The $2,500, I think it's any amount of money. If I told you 10, would you feel better about it?
I'd feel a little bit better.
You would?
I think so. 10,000.
What does it get you, though? In the end, $10,000 doesn't buy anything more back than what you lost.
I don't know what 10,000 gets you exactly in Afghanistan, but my assumption is that it gets you a lot more than 2,500.
But does that really help you? Is that really what you want?
Is the money unimportant to you, really? It sounds like the money's really...
I'm not a victim, so I don't know that I can answer that. To me, if it happened...
And at this point, Marla told us a story about how, before she got into this line of work,
I had several friends who were journalists.
one of those friends was a man named Chris Hondros.
Yeah, he's a photojournalist. He was a photojournalist.
And back in 2011, Chris was on assignment in Libya, moving with a rebel group, when they were fired upon. Chris was killed.
Yeah.
And Marla says, when she found out that happened,
I wanted someone to explain to me why that happened. I mean, so I just wanted someone to explain. I didn't, I knew his family wasn't going to get any money. I knew that these guys that shot a rocket propelled grenade at him weren't going to care. No one was going to explain. But I wanted that.
And the money then becomes an occasion for you to say, like, not just I'm sorry, but here's what happened. It's the here's what happened part.
I think it's the token that's given with the apology and with the explanation.
But it's the apology and the explanation that matter to you.
Yeah, that's why we call it amends. Making amends.
One of the things that is true of money damages generally is there are desperate effort to find some common language between the party paying and the victim. Some Esperanto for communicating the meaning of what's happened in a language that the other side knows matters.
that's how John Witt puts it.
Because we see it everywhere we look. We see not just apologies, sometimes not apologies at all, but we see the almighty dollar, which is both distressing and also we know it's meaningful.
But the problem is, in order for that Esperanto to work, it has to say the same meaning to both sides. Which for John Tracy wasn't really about the money at all. Or not just about the money. It was as much about the envelope that the money was in, or that there was a real person there to hand it to them.
I wasn't the one who raided their house. I wasn't the one who killed their daughter. But most of them, they, just wanted to look at somebody who's in a uniform and say, you really messed with my life.
And that opportunity is exactly what Abdullah Al-Taisi
ما هو الأهم الاعتذار ولا الدفع؟
will never get.
دفع ولا اعتذار؟ ما قاعد دفع إلا باعتذار.
His son was killed by a drone he never saw, operated by a man he'll never meet, on behalf of a country that still doesn't admit it was a mistake. And so the money he got...
مقتنع أنت بالدفعية اللي دوكم إياها؟
which in the end he says was the equivalent of 30,000 US dollars, way more than anyone got in Iraq or Afghanistan. Still, all he can do, without anything else to go on, is just compare amounts.
Or he can accept that only if he gets like the payment equal to those to like in America how you compensate someone who lost his son, for example, killed.
If the payment was equal.
Yeah.
Producer Matthew Kielty.
Big thanks to Gregory Johnson, writer-at-large for BuzzFeed, who started us off on this adventure when he brought us the initial story.
And also thanks to BuzzFeed editor Steve Kandel.
And to Shaib Al-Masawa for helping Matt organize that interview in Yemen when the country's going through an awful lot of tumult, and he was able to get interviews that we didn't think he could get.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to him. Coming up, that's next.
Hi, Lulu here, and this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and as someone who reports on mental health, who likes talking to people about their mental health and what they look to in science, in the natural world, in faith, in friendship, wherever it may be, to help guide them through the rough patches of life, I just wanted to take a moment to say what seems to help people turn corners, find relief, get out of ruts, and even flourish is having someone with you. As much as we can feel private about our mental health struggles, you do not have to go it alone. So this May, why not treat your mental health to a buddy? And who better to talk to than a fully licensed mental health therapist? With over 30,000 therapists available, BetterHelp has someone you can talk to available at pretty much any time that's convenient for you at the push of a button. And because finding the help you need often depends on the therapist-client vibe, rest assured, with BetterHelp, you can switch providers at any time. Remember, truly, your mental health matters, and you don't have to go it alone. Find the support you need anytime with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/radiolab. That's betterhelp.com/radiolab.
On this week's On the Media, I spoke to the MAGA warrior who ended up defending the Federal Emergency Management Agency against the administration's assault.
He proceeded to berate me over the fact that the media got a hold of a story and was running a topic that they felt was too sensitive and not fit for public domain.
The topic was abolishing FEMA.
Correct.
You don't want to miss this one. Tune in to On the Media from WNYC. Find On the Media wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, now it's my left ear. Hello, Soren. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
I'm good.
Hey, I'm Chad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radio Lab, and so far we've been talking about the value of our lives.
And then the value of other people's lives.
Next up, the value of
Everything.
all of it.
Everything.
Everything. And by everything, of course, we mean
The value of nature.
that's Carl Zimmer, science writer, regular blower of minds.
So we think of ecosystems as just kind of sitting there, but actually they're doing things. If they weren't doing them for us, we would have to pay to do them artificially. For example, cotton farms in South Texas. So that, the farmers are doing their thing,
Like this guy.
James Parker.
planting their cotton, they're collecting it.
I farmed about, I don't know, usually 500 to 600, 700 acres of cotton, so say 2,000 bales.
They're doing what farmers do.
I spend a lot of time on a tractor, and you have to check your water every morning, every evening.
Meanwhile, they have all this extra help in the air.
Yes.
They have bats
How many bats are out there, you really don't know.
flying all around. The bats eat the equivalent of 2/3 of their own weight in insects every night.
Wow.
They eat all night long, all kind of bugs.
A whole bunch of pests that would otherwise be eating the cotton.
Now, a few years ago,
A guy named John Westfall
did a calculation.
Just to see how this arrangement was working out.
He came out to my farm and did a study. He had some college girls that worked for him, and those girls were out there all hours of the night listening to what the bats were saying. And
Each year, the farmers, collectively, they make about $4 or $5 million off of these farms.
The question was, how much of this was because of the bats? 'Cause, bats are natural pesticides.
If the more they're eating, the less I got to spray.
And here's what the scientists figured out.
Out of $4 to $5 million, it was around $700,000 that you could ascribe to the bats.
It's just beautiful.
Wow. I mean, it does make me think that if you're those farmers, you should be compensating the bats somehow.
Yeah. It does give you a glimpse at the kind of scale of value, economic value, that nature has that we generally just totally ignore.
But we talked to a guy who didn't ignore it.
My name is Robert Costanza.
In fact, he took this way of thinking to the absolute limit.
Yes. So the question was, what's the value of all of these ecosystem services globally?
All the services on Earth.
It's bugs eating leaves,
Worms turning the soil,
beetles chewing tree stumps,
coral reefs protecting cities during storms.
everything.
We tried to synthesize all of the studies that had been done around the country and the world.
Like that bat study, except they didn't just look at cotton farms, they looked at
Tropical forests, rivers and lakes, coral reefs, coastal wetlands, inland wetlands, the ocean, woodlands, temperate forests.
It goes on and on.
Grasslands.
This must be some Excel spreadsheet.
It's kind of the Excel spreadsheet from hell.
It can get tricky.
So Costanza and his colleagues took all these different studies, summed them together, did a whole bunch of math, and came up with a number.
Which in today's dollars is $142.7 trillion per year of services. That's more than all of the gross national products of the world.
Wow.
That's how valuable the services of nature are.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I get the way this would work with a bat, like the bat's eating the bugs, but how do you do it with a field or something? Do you just walk through and you're like, yeah, that's $20 of services, that's 50. How do you even figure out what the services are?
Well, they came up with a list. The list kind of depends on the ecosystem you're talking about, because different ecosystems provide different services. For example, a salt marsh.
And we are in the water now. We're in the water.
What is it? Wait, so a salt marsh, is it like the Florida wetlands but salty? I suddenly don't know what a salt marsh is.
Salt marshes are wetlands that are on the coast.
Got it.
Yep, we're standing in about a foot of water here. We're quickly approaching high tide.
We sent one of our producers, Simon Adler, to a nearby salt marsh.
Partially to hazen.
Your boots are much more waterproof. Yeah.
But really, to talk to this guy.
My name is Adam Welchel, and I'm the Director of Science for the Nature Conservancy here in Connecticut.
And Adam gave Simon a kind of inventory of
some of the services provided by coastal salt marshes. It's a stream of goods and services provided over time.
One of the things it does is it takes water that's coming in from inland and that's laden with all sorts of pollutants, all sorts of bad stuff.
The salt marsh will trap that water so that the pollutants settle, and then very often the marsh grass will suck up that water into the roots
and clean it up.
Yep.
So you could ask very simply,
how much would you have to spend to keep your water that clean?
1 second. Well, there is one other study I want.
Adam Welchel said that scientists in New England have already figured that out.
For flood control, water supply protection, pollution control, it's roughly about $31.22 per hectare per year.
Then you got to add the value of all the plants that feed the fish that end up on our dinner plates.
$338 annually per acre.
Then there are the bird watchers that buy lattes and support the local economy.
$490 per hectare.
And then there's habitat provisioning.
The list goes on and on and on and on.
You do get kind of obsessed with it. You start becoming an accountant and writing down numbers just furiously. It gets you to think about nature in a different way than you had before.
There's this galling element, though, or this aspect. Like when I first came across the...
At this point, our producer, Tim Howard, jumped into the interview, and you'll also hear our producer, Soren Wheeler, in just a second.
I do feel like in an example like the salt marsh, which cleans water, that's all reliant on people being there that need the water. So if you didn't have people there, does that salt marsh cease to have any value?
But Tim, haven't you ever had a conversation with somebody who just doesn't get? Like if you make the aesthetic argument, which is that nature should should be preserved for its own sake. There's a whole category of humanity that just doesn't respond to that argument. This becomes a way to talk across the aisle.
But it does still feel like it demotes something of infinite value to something of a piddly value.
Well, they can't really be infinite value. I mean,
Like a mother's love. You don't think your mother's love is priceless? I mean,
Okay, I totally accept that there is this sort of priceless aspect of nature. But if you are in the government in a very poor country, you have some tough choices to make. If somebody comes to you and says, okay, you've got these lovely mangroves. Now, it turns out that this sort of setting where the mangroves are is the perfect place for shrimp aquaculture.
Because shrimp farms need lots of seawater, so it makes sense to put them by the sea.
We're going to put in these farms, we're going to grow shrimp. You are going to get millions and millions of dollars in tax revenue. If you're thinking about the welfare of all the people in your country, many of whom are starving, that might be a really powerful argument. Now, into that kind of a discussion, you can bring in the fact that these mangroves are sitting there very quietly doing all sorts of incredibly valuable things. In fact, they've done these kind of calculations, and in some cases, the services that mangroves provide are 4 times more valuable than what you could get out with shrimp. So it's stupid. It's just stupid in a very basic sense to wantonly replace lots of mangroves with shrimp aquaculture.
Is that a hypothetical situation?
No.
That's a
no,
conversation
that's
you
what
have.
we're asked.
This is Glenn Marie Lang. She's an environmental economist for the World Bank, and she says very often she finds herself in exactly this kind of conversation.
Particularly, I work for the World Bank, so our primary clients are governments.
Philippines, Vietnam.
And when you're talking to a minister of finance and saying, you know what,
I know jobs are jobs, but you need those marshes. They have value.
They'll say, well, yeah, that's true, but that means I'm going to have to reduce the money that I put into the education budget. So you've got to really make a strong argument about the benefits. That's really where the rubber hits the road.
Well, I mean, that's it.
Here's the counter argument. It comes from Doug McCauley, an ecologist at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
The real danger is that we actually succeed, that we convince people that nature is valuable because it makes money, and then we're really in trouble in the many instances where it doesn't make us money.
What do you do in a situation, he says, where, say, a bunch of rivers are running dry and they're, quote, depreciating in value?
By the same logic that you trained me to think with, we should go out and liquidate these natural assets. That makes me feel really uncomfortable.
He says it's just kind of a weird way to think about nature.
We had a proposal here in the state of California to make gay marriage legal. And economists had a look at this legislation and said, this is expected to generate $163 million annually for the state of California. Well, it's good to know that. I appreciate having that information in front of me. However, when I'm making a decision on this legislation, and I would say that when many legislators, voters, average citizens are considering the issues at hand, they're not thinking about whether they're going to make $160 million for the state. They're thinking about a different set of values.
On the other hand, I want to say, and this is based on my experience working in developing countries, that when you don't put a value on these services, basically they don't get counted.
They get implicitly assigned a value of 0, according to Glenn Marie Lang. And as we were debating this and going back and forth, we bumped into a story about what happens when all of these value of nature ideas are let loose into a world of fruits and trees and human uncertainty.
The parable of the bees.
We heard this first from writer J.B. McKinnon, who says the story begins
in Mao County in central China, rural area, fairly remote.
Lush green mountains filled with apple orchards.
And apple orcharding was the main business.
And according to JB, in the 1990s,
the wild bees of Mao County slowly started to disappear. And there's a few different reasons given for that. It could have been the destruction of the habitat that the bees nested in, the heavy honey harvesting that wasn't leaving enough food for the bees.
But the prevailing theory is actually an economic one, because in the 1990s, as China was shifting to a market-based economy, apple producers were under pressure to produce more apples. So they started spraying pesticide.
Probably it was a constellation of all of those things and a few others. End result is the bees stopped buzzing in Mao County.
Which, if you are an apple farmer, that's a disaster.
As bees travel from flower to flower in search of nectar, they're dusted with pollen, which is the means by which flowers engage in sexual intercourse. So if you don't have the bees making the birds and the bees on the blossoms, then you don't get fertile flowers to turn into fruit.
And obviously, if you're a fruit farmer and you have no fruit to sell, you have no income.
So what do?
If you're an apple farmer and you don't have bees, then you need to find some other way to pollinate the flowers. And I guess they concluded, well, we'll have to do that ourselves by hand.
In Mandarin Chinese, we say 人工授粉, so basically that means a manual pollination.
This is Harold Thibault.
I'm a correspondent in China for the French newspaper Le Monde.
A couple of years ago, he heard about the apple farmers in Mao County, so he flies to Chengdu, and he and a friend hop in a car, and
we drive for like 5 or 6 hours until we reach this village, Nanxin.
Tiny little village.
It's like only a few houses. And then we took a small road between the fields, and we actually saw that there were lots of farmers in the trees, like on the apple trees,
straddling up on these often thin and spindly branches, men and women that I've seen in photos in any case.
Harold and his friend took pictures, and if you look at those pictures, you'll see the farmers holding a little brush.
This little pollen brush that they'd constructed using things like chopsticks and chicken feathers and cigarette filters.
And they'd have a little bottle filled with pollen, and then what they do, they dip the brush into the bottle and they paint a flower blossom with the pollen. They dip their brush back into the pollen and they paint the next flower blossom again, and they dip the brush back in again and they paint again and they dip again and they paint.
To make sure that all of the blossoms that they could possibly fertilize would be fertilized so that they would go on to produce fruit.
We're talking hundreds and hundreds of flowers per tree.
It was very strange to see humans doing the job of the bees.
God, what a pain in the ass that sounds like.
Yeah, the image of these Chinese orchardists standing up in these spindly trees traveled around the world through environmental circles, and the message that it seemed to send was that, this is what happens if you lose biodiversity. You end up standing in the trees doing the job that the bees used to do on the wing.
For free.
For free.
Those people are just like human bees.
But then this guy enters the story. This is Yin Sun Chen.
Yeah, human bees.
4 years ago, he traveled to Mao County to do a sort of economic analysis of just how much the loss of the bees was hurting the farmers of Mao County. But what he discovered, weirdly, was that the trees were producing more apples than ever.
More production. This can be confirmed. There are more production for hand pollination apple tree than a bee pollination apple tree. Humans are more efficient.
Really? You mean the people were doing it better than the bees had been doing it?
Yes.
A lot better.
Fruit production went up 30%.
That's what the farmers told Yin Sun Chen, which is kind of
amazing. The only word I remember, amazing. Because I think hand pollination can pollinate more thoroughly. They can pollinate every flower.
And bees don't pollinate every flower?
Bees are a little bit, they're a little bit uneven when it comes to pollinating.
You're so polite.
They don't like it if it's cold. They don't like it if it's damp. They don't like it if it's windy.
In all those cases, bees often decide to stay indoors and just take the day off.
But send people out there and tell them to pollinate every damn blossom, and they're going to do it. And there was the additional benefit of the people that you paid. They'd go to the bar, they'd buy groceries, they'd spend those earnings in their local communities in a way that obviously bees never did.
So here you had this whole story that was supposed to be about how important the bees are, this whole parable of biodiversity.
And it turns out maybe the lesson's just the opposite, that actually we don't need bees, and maybe we never did.
If we only measure things economically, then we might conclude that some species or some ecological processes just aren't necessary in certain places, or that we might even do better to take care of those processes ourselves.
Right. So let me find my notes, but the wages exactly.
But there's one more chapter to the story. Harold Thibault told us that when he visited Nanchen,
I talked with one farmer. His name is Zheng Zhegao. He's 38, and he said, in his opinion, the hand pollination might disappear in a few years.
Apparently, as China's economy has continued to grow, workers have started demanding better pay.
The wages are getting so high for the workers that the farmers have to employ to help them. Basically, it's not efficient economically to do the pollination anymore. That's what a lot of farmers say. They still
Now they're likely thinking, damn, we need those bees back.
Right, yeah.
Problem is,
there are no bees in those villages anymore.
One farmer told Harold beekeepers in other parts of China aren't going to bring their bees to this area because they worry about the pesticides that the farmers have used. As for when wild bees might come back,
well, for this, we have no idea. It's very hard to make a prediction. If you ask the farmers, they're like, I don't know.
Here's where that story leaves me. It leaves me thinking that economics is just not a good way to go. Putting a value, even a precise and thoughtful value on a bee or on a pound of pesticide, you do it and you think you're smart, but then the value changes. The bees go from being worth a lot to being worth nothing to being worth everything, all within a few years. This is what markets do. They swing back, forth, and we pretend that we can predict, but we never can. So you can't put a value on because you're always going to be wrong. That's why economics is a dumb.
Well, no. I want to argue the other side for a second. Nowhere in the story did someone walk into the middle of the proceedings and say, you know what, the bees do have value. Here's the number. In fact, Carl, when we were talking to him, told us.
There have been estimates that the value of the pollination that comes from wild bees is $190 billion.
So that's globally, right? But still, there was nobody in the room giving that kind of number, so the bees were inherently valued at zero.
But remember, bees are valued at zero only until humans get valued more. Then bees go down, bees go up. You have to have a lot of numbers in your head.
But here's what I like about this idea is that when you put a number on a bee or a bat or a marsh, it's like an attempt to force a kind of long-term thinking. You can't just say, don't do that. I mean, that's the thing that conservationists say, don't. But if you say, don't do that because here's the value.
Here's the loss.
Here's the loss. Well, then that actually gives the whole precautionary don't thing some teeth.
Well, except for this, that if you go businessy on nature and you're wrong,
there are irreversibilities.
That's how environmental economist Glenn Marie Lang puts it.
This is one of the differences between nature, ecosystems, and what we produce. You smash your car, hey, someone can build a new one. If you lose the bees, many instances you cannot bring them back.
So the question we got to is there another way to think about the value of nature in a way that's not economic and therefore short-sighted and all about us, but also not simply about the aesthetics and the beauty, because that can be sort of limiting too. Is there another way?
The best I was able to do, thinking about this,
writer J.B. McKinnon again,
was when it struck me that in a way, all of this diversity that's out there, all this biological diversity, all these wonderful and amazing and alien things that other species can do, is like an extension of our own brains. There's so much imagination out there that we simply could not come up with on our own, that we can think of it as a pool of imagination and creativity from which we as humans are able to draw. And that when we draw down on that pool of creativity and imagination, we deeply impoverish ourselves. In a sense, we are doing harm to our own ability to think and to dream.
J.B. McKinnon's book is called The Once and Future World. He's written many, but this one is my fave.
Deep thanks to Carl Zimmer, who's reporting in the New York Times on this topic, is really what got us launched into this whole thing.
And what got us through this whole thing is Simon Adler, whose production assistance was invaluable. That was him
freezing his ass off in the marsh.
I talked so long, and then he nearly died. His toes fell off. Anyway. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you guys for listening. I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Grolich.
We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm from the Bay Area, California, and here are the staff credits. Radiolab is hosted by Lulu Miller and Latif Nasser. Soren Wheeler is our executive editor. Sarah Sandbach is our executive director. Our managing editor is Pat Walters. Dylan Keefe is our director of sound design. Our staff includes Jeremy Bloom, W. Harry Fortuna, David Gable, Maria Paz Gutierrez, Sindhu Naina Sambandan, Matt Keelty, Mona Modgaoker, Annie McEwen, Alex Neeson, Sarah Kari, Natalia Ramirez, Rebecca Rand, Anissa Vitze, Arian Wack, Molly Webster, and Jessica Young, with help from Gabby Santos. Our fact-checkers are Diane Kelly, Emily Krieger, Natalie Middleton, Angeli Mercado, and Sophie Samaid.
Hi, I'm Aubrey, calling from Salt Lake City, Utah. Leadership support for Radiolab's science programming is provided by the Simons Foundation and the John Templeton Foundation. Foundational support for Radiolab was provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.
Pop, 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 that is the sound of popcorn popping to announce the big news that Radiolab is headed to the Tribeca Festival podcast stage for a special live show in New York City. We will be headlining the podcast program with this one-night-only live show at the festival's 25th anniversary. Come on out on June 9th at 6 p.m. for a show that will literally give you chills. Tickets are available now at tribecafilm.com/audio. That's tribecafilm.com/audio.
Hey, I'm Latif Nasser.
Hi, I'm Molly Webster, and this is Radiolab.
And what are we doing today, Molly?
Okay, well, Latif, remember back in 2009, before you and I both worked at the show, there was an episode called Parasites.
Oh my god, love that episode.
It is really one of my favorites. And in that episode, we talk about this tiny, maybe creepy little worm called a hookworm.
That's right.
You remember it?
Yeah, I mean, it hooked into my brain. Like the
hookworm
it
hooked
has
into your
that,
brain.
It's the story of that one guy, and then there's the final scene where he's walking through.
Oh wait, okay, wait. You don't actually have to say. don't say what the final scene is.
Okay.
Is because what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna play the hookworm's chunk of that episode.
Oh, okay.
And then I have an update, a 20-year later hookworm and human medical update.
VH1 behind the music. Where is the hookworm now?
Yes. Where's the hookworm and where is the human?
Okay, great.
This whole episode, it introduced this idea that this thing that we think is like the biggest, scariest, grossest pest of all time.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not as gross as you think.
Yeah.
And now, 20 years later, people are saying maybe they're really not as gross as you think.
Love it.
And there's just like all this cool new research about hookworms in the human body, and specifically one very important type of disease, autoimmune disorders.
Ooh, that, as you know, is one I'm particularly interested in. But well, yeah, I'm sold. I would like to hear more.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna play the original hookworm segment just so we all know what's going on, and then we'll jump into an update in about 20 minutes.
Okay, great.
Wait, you're listening?
You're listening to Radiolab. From
WNYC.
Rewind.
Hello, I'm Jad Abumrad.
And I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab. Our topic today:
Parasites.
Parasites.
Now, we've met them, they're nice, and we've met them when they're not so nice.
I don't know that we've met any nice ones, really.
Oh, we haven't? I thought that...
Oh, the blood flukes.
Yeah,
They were
Carol with
pretty
the blood
nice.
flukes.
Yeah, they were nice.
So, and now the question is, let's just talk about scale. I mean, for the most part, they're irritating and little, and they seem kind of
Invisible.
and sort of off stage.
Yeah.
But when you back off a little bit and consider them, in the effects that they have on the world,
They're actually these powerful sculptors of monumental narrative.
in other words, these are little guys telling very big stories.
In fact, here's an example. Recently, I went to visit a guy named Dixon Despommier up at Columbia University. He's a parasitologist and, well, he does a bunch of different things. But we ended up talking about, he told me this crazy story.
Okay, Molly jumping in here really quick. This next part of the story, which has to do with Rockefeller, think of it like those stories that has been told so many times, it starts to become like a tall tale. It's a living myth. So the facts are a little blurry, but the idea is right. Here we go.
The story I love telling the most is how we eradicated hookworm.
The story begins in 1908.
John D. Rockefeller Sr.,
really rich guy, is sitting in his New York office, and he's thinking,
how can I make more money selling something to the South?
yeah, I've got all this money, got all these resources, I just need a new market. In terms of new markets, the South was pretty much untapped. If only those damn Southerners.
Just get off their butts and get going.
Problem was, they weren't. They weren't getting off their butts.
The farms were not operational, the economic engine was turned off.
The economy was in the toilet, and so John D. Rockefeller wanted to know why. Why aren't they producing more?
Yep. What's happened to their economic engine?
So he thought,
I know, I'll form a commission.
yeah,
So he sent out a bunch of economists and sociologists and people like that on the original Rockefeller Commission. They did everything a commission could possibly do to try to find out why these Southern gentlemen were not rising to the occasion. And they came back with the following conclusion. Well, we don't exactly know what's wrong, but we think that these people are sick from something because they don't behave like we do.
what does that mean?
They are slow, not mentally. They're slow physically. They're pale. I'll give you an example. Remember the movie Deliverance?
Sure.
Okay. Remember that little guy that played the banjo?
I remember the other scene that we all remember.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about that.
No, we're not. No, we're not. But if you can recall what that little banjo player looked like. A little wiry-looking guy, but he looked old.
Sickly, pale.
Yeah, sickly, pale, and yet an adult.
Well, wait a second. That is not a description of all Southerners.
No.
It's a description of
No.
one teeny corner in a.
No, but what the commission did say about a lot of these Southern people that they encountered is that a lot of them, they just don't look right. They look weak, they look wan, they look kind of wan.
They were wan.
Pale, lethargic.
It's interesting. Wan or wan?
Wan.
You choose.
So the thought was that maybe these Southerners had some kind of laziness disease. This is really what a lot of folks thought. But one member on the committee suggested to Rockefeller, you know what? Perhaps these people are anemic.
Anemic? They're anemic, you say? Yeah, they're anemic. It sounds like a medical problem then. Maybe they're not lazy after all. Maybe they're anemic, and maybe they're just weak.
Next thing you know, Rockefeller puts together another commission
to find out what the basis for the anemia was. And not only did they find anemia, but they found a correlation of the anemia with soil types. That's bizarre. Sandy loamy soils, anemia. Hard-packed clay soils, no anemia. Sandy loamy soils, good farmland. Hard-packed clay soils, not such good farmland. So all the rich farmers were anemic and all the poor farmers were doing okay.
And this seemed to be a clue. The incidence of anemia was linked somehow to the soil. Maybe,
yes,
something was in the soil.
That's correct. So somehow they hit upon this idea of looking for hookworm.
The hookworm.
The hookworm.
So they thought, all right, let's run some tests.
And when they did, big time, they discovered hookworm big time. So the anemia is due to hookworm.
Now the question became, how are these Southerners getting the hookworm and giving it to one another? And a pretty good place to start to look for an answer was their feces. Because if these hookworms are in you, they're going to come out of you when you go to the bathroom. So they asked these Southerners, when you guys defecate, where do you do it? Most of them said something like this.
And I defecate over there. See that tree over there? That's where I defecate. So I defecate over there, but I live over here.
Okay, so then the investigators asked the next question. When you go to that tree and do it, do you wear any shoes? Most of them said no.
Barefoot, just like everybody else. because it's comfortable.
So clearly these worms are in the feces that are landing near the tree. They're somehow getting into people's feet the next time they come to use the tree. But no one intentionally steps in their own, no one does that. Which meant...
Oh my goodness, it can crawl. Right, so let's find out how far it can crawl.
So what they did, these researchers, is they built a sandbox. And then they took some hookworm-infested stool
and put it right in the middle. Then every day, we'll sample from the stool sample out in the sand in all directions and find larvae and find out how far they can travel. How's that sound? So now we have larvae in the stool, and they begin to crawl away from the stool, seeking a victim. On day 1, they crawled an entire foot in all directions, but they weren't at 2 feet. On day 2, my God, they're at 2 feet. At day 3, they're at 3 feet. I can't believe this. They're crawling a long way. Day 4, they crawled to 4 feet.
What about day 5?
I'm allowed to ask that. And what about day 5?
5 feet? No. 4 feet.
That's it. So how in the world could you deal with this problem when these worms can crawl? They can crawl 4 feet. It doesn't matter where you defecate. They're going to crawl away from that. And within a 4-foot radius of that stool sample, you're going to get hookworm. Unless you do something radical that's never been done before. They devised a scheme for burying the stool sample into the ground 6 feet deep.
Because if the worms can only make it 4 feet, well then that's 2 feet past the point where they die.
We call that the outhouse. And in fact, Rockefeller got his wish. The South did rise again.
That sounds too easy to me, though. Yeah, but you're telling me that an understanding of hookworm, which created the outhouse, removed the, quote, southern laziness disease, and they did rise?
It did.
And you bring that all back to the hookworm?
I do.
Really?
No, I believe bring it back to sanitation.
Now, to be fair, you can find plenty of other reasons why the South rose again.
Air conditioning and highways and universities and stuff like that.
So the hookworm had some help. But what is clear is that when we as a country began to distance ourselves from our own excrement, to put it bluntly, when we stopped walking around in our own there were all of these unintended consequences.
Salmonella disappeared. E. histolytica disappeared. Shigella disappeared. Cholera disappeared. Giardia disappeared. Cryptosporidium. Anything that's associated with parasites in feces disappeared. Every time we built outhouses and people used them religiously, guess what? Their kids could stay in school longer. They could learn more. They got ahead faster.
Dixon Desmamier is a professor of public health and environmental health sciences and microbiology at Columbia University.
Can they make longer titles at that university?
He literally wrote the book on parasites.
The book is called Parasitic Diseases. You know it very well. It's soon to be a major motion picture, but now in its 4th edition.
In its 4th edition.
And while we're on the subject of hookworms and the glorious campaign to deworm America, because this has been a very carefully crafted and intentionally fair program, you have heard the case against hookworms. Now, let's turn the coin and say something nice about hookworms. And to begin that discussion, let's go to our reporter, Patrick Walters. So, Pat, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Robert.
So, tell us a little bit about this fellow. What's his name exactly?
His name is Jasper Lawrence.
That's right, Jasper Lawrence.
So, where is he from?
He actually grew up in England. He grew up in this little farm in the southwest corner of England. And it's important to know, I think, before hearing any part of his story, that Jasper has had allergies for pretty much his whole life.
On really bad days, my eyes would swell up so much from pollen or airborne allergens that they would feel like they were swelling shut. I could feel my eyes squeaking in my sockets. It was an enormously uncomfortable feeling.
but it was nothing debilitating.
They were just allergies.
So, he just, like most other people with allergies, just learned to deal with it.
You live with it.
But
what changed for me in my late 20s, early 30s was my asthma. And at that time, I was living in Santa Cruz. I was relatively recently married. We had 3 cats that had been grandfathered in with the relationship. And I started a landscaping business. I really didn't want to work for someone else.
I think someone with allergies starting a landscaping business, that seems kind of unexpected.
Stupid is actually the word for it. And within 6 months or a year,
he starts to notice
this really weird barking cough.
Was there anything particular that brought this on?
No, it was just sitting and breathing. Cats certainly didn't help.
Right.
And during that period, my asthma got much worse very, very quickly. By the time it was 1996, 1997, I was seeing specialists, having skin allergen tests, and cycling through emergency inhalers, trying Singulair and all these other drugs that were coming on the market. I was being hospitalized at least a couple of times a year. I mean, I looked terrible. I had dark eyes and pale, waxy skin. I had that allergic look. It was a really bad time.
And he decides in the summer of 2004 to take a vacation. He made this visit to England.
Yeah. I took my 2 daughters back to see my aunt who had raised me. Very early in the visit, I was sitting at her kitchen table, and she asked me if I'd seen a BBC documentary about parasites and their connection with things like asthma and allergies and multiple sclerosis. And of course I hadn't. But I went upstairs and got on the internet after lunch, and I stayed on the internet until perhaps 2 in the morning. I didn't stop.
And he's reading and reading and
the work of all these researchers.
One study after the next.
Japan, epidemiological studies in Africa, animal models of multiple sclerosis. This enormous weight of evidence
that in the developing world, people don't really have asthma or allergies. And what he discovers is that behind all of this, to his shock, is hookworms.
Hookworm?
Yeah, hookworms.
Yeah, I learned that asthma was 50% less likely in someone who had a hookworm infection.
So this sort of just hits you.
Oh yeah.
What did you think when you read that?
Oh, I immediately was determined to obtain hookworm. Immediately. I couldn't wait.
So hookworms are these very tiny worms the size of a little hair. But if you take a microscope and you zoom way in, they have this big circular mouth brimming full of pointy teeth. Very scary to look at. They have these toothy mouths so that they can burrow up through your feet, ride through your blood, and eventually end up down in your gut and start chewing on the inside of your intestines.
This guy wants hookworms in his intestines?
Absolutely. And so did you just Google it?
Yeah, hookworms for sale. I mean, someone's got to be selling them.
But
nothing. I contacted every laboratory supply company in the world and parasitology research centers, and they all said the same thing. No. Various flavors of no. And so I came to the conclusion that I was going to have to go to the tropics.
So, fast forward a little. Jasper is in Cameroon along the coast.
Quite literally and figuratively, the armpit of Africa.
He's 200 miles north of the equator. It's extremely hot. He finds a guy to drive him around. So he and his driver would go to a village.
He'd get out of the car,
walk up to these villagers, and ask them if they could see a latrine.
Just an open area of ground, usually with bushes so people can have a little bit of privacy. And I would go over to the area, remove my shoes, and start walking. The first time I did that, I almost couldn't do it. It must have been 110 degrees that day, 100% humidity. And the stench and the noise from the insects, it was so repulsive and so disgusting.
How many villages, latrines do you think you visited?
Between 30 and 40.
Jasper spent 2 weeks there walking around in village latrines, and then he flew home.
I got back from Africa in early February,
So I was looking at allergy season coming up, and the day I realized that I no longer had allergies, that was such a good day. I got into my car and I started driving, and I had the window down. I felt the breeze blowing across my face. In the past, what that meant was that very quickly my eyes would be itching uncontrollably, snot and phlegm was going to be pouring out of every orifice in my face. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I just started screaming in the car. I was so happy. And I haven't had an asthma attack since I went to Africa. I no longer have allergies. The vast majority of the benefit that I've experienced has come from hookworm.
What is the hookworm doing? Do you know?
Well, so the immune system that we learn about in elementary school is all about like these attack cells that go after foreign invaders and destroy them, right? And that's a big important part of the immune system. But if the immune system were allowed to attack and destroy things unchecked, it could kill you. And there are lots of diseases where the primary symptoms are caused by the immune system attacking the body that it's really designed to protect. Allergies and asthma are just two of these. Some of the more serious ones are like type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, in which the immune system actually starts attacking the inside of the intestines. There are like 80 of these diseases.
80.
And so what scientists have found in lots and lots of mouse studies, and in some human studies to this point too, is that once the hookworms get inside the gut and the immune system actually starts attacking, somehow hookworms actually stimulate these cells, which just quiet things down and tell the attack cells to stop attacking.
So these are like lullaby cells?
Exactly. What lots and lots of scientists think, Joel Weinstock,
Tufts Medical Center,
and dozens of others, is that over
thousands and thousands of years,
hookworms almost developed in tandem with the human immune system.
coevolution. Parasites living within your body, your immune system changes.
So you got to a point where the hookworms could survive safely.
Worm gets a home, there's food coming down the food pipe, and in return,
the human immune system gains some kind of
some form of
positive regulatory
advantage.
So that if you had this glitch where your immune system started attacking your own body, the presence of the hookworms would keep things
controlled. That's the gift. You do something for the worm does something for you.
So then, by that logic, what we in the West, in the richer countries, have done stupidly is we have cleaned ourselves up too much and we don't have enough wormies in us.
Yeah, this is called...
They call it the hygiene hypothesis.
The hygiene hypothesis. That we're not dirty enough.
Too clean.
We function like rainforests. We're ecosystems, and we've entirely eliminated a class of organism that co-evolved with us and our genetic predecessors for millions of years.
Now, I don't want to leave the impression that hygiene is bad for you. People can't go back to living in filth, kids playing in sewage by the riverbank, but in improving our hygiene, we are also excluding organisms that may be important for making us well.
So then what does Jasper do about all this?
He decides to start a business selling hookworm to people.
What?
You can call him up and he will literally FedEx a dose of hookworms to your door.
How? Sorry, break it for a second. Pat.
Hi, Jad.
Where does he get the hookworm from?
This is weird. Jasper gets the hookworm from himself. Could you describe how you go about getting hookworm from your stool into one of your patients?
Well, it's a very easy organism to work with. It gets up and it walks out of it. So it doesn't take an enormous amount of work to separate it from the feces. And then having done that, I repeatedly wash them in solutions of antibiotics to make sure that anything that could live on them is killed. People contact us, we'll have them complete a questionnaire, submit a recent blood test, then we'll ship them a dose and all the materials and equipment and the instructions necessary to infect themselves.
Is this a safe thing to do?
Jasper,
yes.
Jasper has done tons and tons of research, but he's not a doctor.
Right.
The treatment is not approved by the FDA.
That's what I wonder. Is there any serious sort of double double-blind study trying to figure out whether some safe delivery of hookworm might make sense?
Yeah, so one of the guys who was sort of a pioneer in this hookworm research is David Pritchard.
I'm Professor David Pritchard,
immunologist and parasitologist
at the University of Nottingham, where I study parasites and the wound healing properties of maggots. So we've now got 2 safety trials under our belts, but we've yet to conduct the trials to show the therapeutic benefit results from infection with worms.
So Pritchard infected himself pretty much just to make sure that it was safe.
What we did was 10 of us in the lab took worms at different doses. We were either given 10, 25, 50 or 100 worms, and then we had to report on the symptoms. And on the back of that study, we determined that 10 worms were tolerated.
But Pritchard, when he did this proof of safety study, actually gave himself 50 hookworms.
Oh.
Which put him out of commission for a while.
Well, I felt pretty bad. I mean, pain in the gut, really. You could feel them because they are biting on your tissues.
I mean, if you have too many hookworms, they can cause things like diarrhea, and the most serious side effect, and the side effect that makes them sort of a public health enemy, is that they can give you anemia.
So if you have too many, you lose quite a bit of blood to these parasites.
Well, if you take too many hookworm, which you're not going to if you come to us, the worst thing you're going to get is anemia. But it's not like you wake up one morning and you're drained of blood. It's very slow to develop, and it's very easy to deal with.
Jasper's kind of just gone for it. It's a very sort of like cowboy move.
To the scientific community, I think they believe that I'm premature.
It's not FDA approved.
In offering this to the public.
You don't know what it is. You don't know its purity. It's not safe.
But I've talked to several clients who had really severe allergies and asthma. They say they've just achieved these great results. And Jasper also says he's seen success with a few multiple sclerosis patients and several Crohn's disease patients too. Like, how many people do you think that you have infected?
It's about 85 right now.
How is business? Is it everything that
business is adequate, but I honestly don't know why I don't wake up in the morning with my front garden 20 deep with people with ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, allergies. I just don't know why I'm not completely buried.
The way he sees it, people are scared.
Well, they're the people who are coming from a point of view of what they learned in kindergarten about clean drinking water and sewers. To them, worms and parasites are so repulsive that there's nothing good to be said about them. But I can make you better. It's simple, it's cheap. I mean, for God's sake, these organisms fall out my rear end every day, 500,000 at a time. The raw material is human excrement, for God's sake. All people have to do is open their minds. Are you really that scared of a little worm?
Which is correct. I don't know.
Okay. So
that's it.
So wait, but okay.
Yeah, maybe the question is, Latif, you have talked about this on the show. You have an autoimmune disorder.
Yes.
Crohn's disease.
Crohn's disease.
Okay,
Yeah.
you've heard this piece. Are you scared of a little worm?
I mean, I am intrigued. I don't know whether to be scared. If there are clinical trials that can help tell me whether to be scared or not of this worm,
All right.
that's what I want to know.
All right. Well, then I am going to tell you about a clinical trial, and then you can tell me what you think.
fuck?
But after the break.
All right. Oh, after the break. All right.
After the break,
Let's do
a
it.
clinical trial.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
Okay.
Great.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is fighting for its life.
I've never been a big fan of FEMA. It really doesn't get the job done,
FEMA's a disaster.
FEMA's a dirty word.
People are waking up in droves to the FEMA camps.
How did the agency tasked with saving us become so distrusted and despised? Listen to American Emergency, the movement to kill FEMA, from WNYC's On the Media.
Latif, we are back from break,
Yeah.
and we left you at, are you scared of a little worm?
And I was like, maybe, I don't know. Let's do some actual clinical trials.
And that is what, okay, so that episode was done in 2009.
Right.
And So I want to fast forward to today. There have been a
This is
number of
great.
clinical
I'm so excited.
trials.
Okay, so what happened?
Okay, so hi.
Hey, how are you?
I talked to this researcher,
Dr. Paul Giacomin,
Paul Giacomin,
Senior Research Fellow at the Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine.
and he's basically trying to do like the next iteration of
Jasper.
of like Jasper, but like with with actual scientific studies and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, trying to understand the potential beneficial effects of worms in people,
So one of the things that he's been studying is
treating people who are at risk of type 2 diabetes with hookworms.
so type 2 diabetes. That's the diabetes you typically get later in life.
Yeah.
What made you pick diabetes?
It sort of came on the back of research which started in the 2010s, where people went into regions of the world where parasitic worms are really common.
And what they found is that there's a correlation between something like type 2 diabetes and the presence or lack of worms.
Yeah, so basically,
So what Paul and his team did is basically they took people who are at risk for type 2 diabetes and they gave them hookworms.
How do they give it to them? How do they take them? Do you like slurp it down like a little piece
No.
of spaghetti?
No,
you know, people think where they're going to enroll, they're going to have to swallow a worm or swallow worm eggs, etc. So
it's actually much worse, or
Okay.
I don't know, it could be much better than that.
basically, in order to do our research,
The first step of the process is they have folks who work in their lab,
these what called worm farms
volunteers
who've consented to have a small number of worms.
living inside of them.
Oh, wow.
Yes, exactly. The only way you can't culture them, you can't just get them and freeze them.
Really?
Yeah, so that's one of the limitations about working with these worms. You actually have to maintain, we call them worm farms.
Is there like hazard pay for that? Like what? Do they get a
No.
bonus?
No, I think they're just very generous volunteers.
Brave and dedicated volunteers. And so that if we want to do our research, we say, hey, generous volunteer.
Can you give me a sample of your stool?
Okay.
Because what happens in these people in the worm farms is the hookworms inside of them will mate.
And they can produce, the females can produce tens of thousands of eggs every day, which are released eventually in the poo.
And so they poop,
We get the poo sample,
add charcoal to it.
which reduces the smell, and then we spread it onto the petri dish.
They leave the petri dish. It's sort of like kind of a humid tropical environment.
Okay.
It sits there for a week.
And over the course of that week,
These tiny hookworm eggs start to hatch. And emerging from them are these
microscopic,
teeny tiny baby worms.
barely visible to the naked eye,
And very quickly, Paul and his team hit them
with like a strong disinfectant.
to clean them.
Then we can basically look down the microscope. We just one by one pick the wriggly worms, put them into a little tube.
And then what they do is they put the worms on a Band-Aid, essentially. And they take that Band-Aid and they put it on the skin of the patients that are enrolled in the clinical trial.
Oh, but not even on a cut, just anywhere on the skin.
Just anywhere on the skin.
And then we sort of sit with them for about 5 minutes because participants start to get this tingling sensation.
Because what happens is these baby worms on the Band-Aid start to release an enzyme,
which degrade tissue,
which basically melts your skin so that they can start to burrow into your skin. And as they enter your skin, then your skin just closes up behind them. The tunnel closes, and then the worm makes their way down through your skin into
the lymphatics,
your lymphatic system. So, if you think of the inside of your body as a water park, as one does, the lymphatic system is like the lazy river.
Sure, yeah.
So these baby hookworms go through the skin cells, fall into this like little lymphatic river. Then they float along through your lymph system. I kind of maybe picture them with, I don't know, cozies of non-alcoholic beer because they are babies on their little tube.
That's funny.
And they're floating downstream. They float along, and they get to what is known as your lymphatic duct, which is kind of right by your collarbone. And once they get there, they get shot out of the lymph stream into your bloodstream.
And once they're gone into the blood, they're cruising around like on a water slide.
They go from your collarbone towards the center of your chest, where they catch this huge slide that sends them into your heart, and then your heart, the thud shoots them out onto another big slide,
That slide starts splitting and branching and splitting and branching, and as it does, the slide is getting smaller and smaller and smaller until
Yeah.
these little baby worms get stuck. They get trapped inside a super tiny blood vessel.
Because they're too big.
Yeah, they're too big for the blood vessel, so they get stuck there.
Their journey ends.
But Paul says
That's their cue.
to again release an enzyme that starts to melt away the walls of the blood vessel.
Whoa.
Just enough. They can wriggle their way through and then pop out on the other side of this blood vessel and into your lungs.
And then what they do is they crawl
They crawl
up through the lung, all the airways,
like a rock climber. Boop, 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 boop.
up your trachea,
So they're almost in your throat.
and then unknowingly,
One day you will cough, which will dislodge these worms from your trachea up into this little free space in your throat, where I like to think that they will do a backward somersault, and then after you cough, you usually swallow.
so yeah, you'll swallow them.
You swallow the worms,
Oh my god.
at which point they will shoot down your esophagus into your stomach.
Oh my god.
And then
why
once
wouldn't you just? Oh, but it's like, why wouldn't you just feed it to people then? Well, like, why do this whole crazy?
Well, because this whole process from skin to gut takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and during that process, the worm is maturing,
Got it.
and so it's actually developing in such a way that it can survive in your stomach.
I see. So it's like this is how it develops.
Exactly.
So it's a really fascinating life cycle. They can survive the stomach acid, and then they sort of make their home in the upper, just beyond the stomach there, in their upper small intestine.
And once they're in the small intestine,
They've got these sort of quite violent-looking teeth,
they will bite and clamp onto you.
and they fairly delicately just sort of suck the blood.
And this is where something sort of amazing happens, which is for the next 2 weeks, your body's going to have this really intense reaction.
Uh-huh.
So where the worm is biting down on your intestinal wall, it's going to get inflamed. There's like an open sore where the worm is sucking, and your body is going to freak out and try and flush the hookworm out. So you're going to have diarrhea, you're going to feel sick, and then it's all going to stop. You're going to feel fine. And Paul says this is most likely because right around this time, the hookworm has reached full adulthood.
And we've actually, in some of our clinical trials, taken a camera and we've had a look in the gut at regions of the gut where the worm's been feeding. And, you know, there might be one little small red spot there where next to a worm, but everywhere else, I think there's this rapid healing. The worm might actually be releasing factors that promote, you know, wound healing, for example.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in their best interest to basically feed and heal the wounds in their environment.
So the really cool thing is that when this hookworm reaches adulthood and it's bit onto you and it's making this hole in your intestine, it can actually release a protein, or maybe many proteins, to heal the wound at the same time. So you're not left with this gaping wound in your stomach. And then it's also producing other proteins that are quieting the immune system.
Because your immune system could just unleash an enormous, attack on these worms.
But obviously the worm does not want that.
Yeah.
And so it has these little proteins it secretes that tells your immune system, shh, be quiet. And you heard about this in our last episode, and I think this is what Jasper also sort of suspected was happening. There was something overall from the hookworms quieting the immune system.
I feel like you've kind of reframed this whole thing for me, so now it's become less like a story of a human clinical trial and more of a story of like Mission Impossible on a worm scale. Like, I'm like, how can this thing like vault over this, but then say the right words to this person that they'll leave them alone, and then climb up the and then it's like, it's crazy. And then use their little blaster to like melt this thing so that they can walk through this wall. It's like crazy. It's like a crazy thing that they're doing.
But here's the thing, Latif. When Paul and his team got to the end of this 2-year trial with people who were at risk for type 2 diabetes,
the people who were treated with the hookworms had things like reduced blood glucose levels, they had dramatically reduced insulin resistance levels, lost a little bit of weight.
And some of these people who were considered pre-diabetic were no longer pre-diabetic.
Oh, wow. So some people were cured, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
While when you look at the placebo people who got no worms,
they went on to continue having high insulin resistance, glucose, no
problems.
weight loss.
Yeah. So it was really the first causal clinical evidence that the worms were having a benefit
on metabolic health.
Then, at the end of the trial, at the end of the 2 years, the people who had the hookworms inside of them, they have the option to just get rid of the worms. Like, you can take an over-the-counter deworming medication and they'll be gone the next day.
Yeah.
Paul says at the end of this 2-year study, almost everyone kept their worms.
Wow. They were happy at the end. They wanted to basically live with their worms. They were happy with them. And this is universal. Every clinical trial, almost universally, at the end of a clinical trial, people are happy with their worms.
Do you think the happiness is emotional, or do you think the happiness is like they actually feel different?
Yeah, exactly. So there's two things. One of them, they might think, well, it's not doing them any harm, so let's just keep them. The other thing is we've, in our 2 most recent clinical trials, which were placebo-controlled.
So these trials were looking at celiac disease.
Yeah. We asked people to do a quality of life and mood and well-being survey. And in both clinical trials, we had this really interesting improvement in well-being and mood and sleeping quality.
Wait, really?
That we saw in the people with the worm treatment, and the placebos, we didn't see it. I can't explain it, but the data was there and it's really compelling.
And there is like
What a weird thing, right?
I know. So here's the thing. I'm going to break that down for you, which is like one of the things we're all talking about right now is our microbiome. Right? It's like, what is the tiny stuff living inside of us, like viruses and bacteria, that's actually helping us?
Right.
One of the things Paul was talking about is like, well, there's also a macrobiome.
The macrobiome, the organisms that you can see with your naked eye, these worms that can, somehow live for up to a decade or even longer within our gut. The immune system should really have recognized these worms and kicked them out because they're such a big insult on the body.
But Paul says it could be that when these worms, when they reach the adulthood in your gut, when they start making the proteins that quiet your immune system, that actually suppresses the immune system, so the immune system doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
And that also means that then the immune system is like not reacting as strongly to some other things. So this is where the whole autoimmune thing gets into play, because in autoimmune diseases, as you know, your own immune system is attacking you.
Right.
And if you've got a worm inside of you telling the immune system, like, hey, you can chill out, I'm kind of part of you.
Yeah.
Like, don't attack me. Then overall, it's just the immune system's not going to attack you.
This is the thing that's really confusing to me is why
we've left you more confused.
No, because why would this is something that we need seemingly to regulate our own kind of internal army, right? It's like, why would we outsource this very crucial part of ourselves?
What do you mean outsource?
Outsource, the worms are not us. If they're helping regulate,
we would outsource it because they're helping. We would outsource it because it's beneficial. You have to imagine, we've been living with worms for millions of years.
Yeah.
And so a worm got inside of us and we probably killed it. And then a worm got inside of us and it probably killed us.
Right.
And then a worm got inside of us and it lasted a little longer.
Yeah.
And then we did or did not die. And it's basically this long-term dance between us and the worm.
So there's this really interesting truce that's happened through evolution where the worm benefits and the host benefits.
The worm benefits because it's getting a place to live and some juicy blood to eat for years. And then the host, us, benefits by not getting sick and dying.
But also from the potential immune shaping and metabolic shaping powers of the worm.
So Paul's lab has shown that people who are given hookworms have fewer symptoms associated with type 2 diabetes, celiac disease. There's also other studies looking for benefits for people with multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis, that's where you get ulcers in your intestines, Crohn's disease, LUTIF. And in those studies, some people have gone into remission with worms. That's not Paul's lab, but that's other labs.
Yeah. And, if they're beneficial and, why not turn it into a treatment?
But that's kind of the thing, which is that since 2009, when we did that Jasper story, even though there are all these studies showing that hookworms are beneficial, hookworms are still not used as a medication or as a treatment.
Yes, there's a lot of hurdles for developing hookworms as a medicinal treatment.
Everyone is kind of like, listen, there's so many reasons why people don't want worms. Like, they're kind of just gross.
But also, I briefly mentioned before, you get the larvae out of people's poo. So making a medicinal product
with standardization and decontamination, it's just really hard.
Exactly. So at this stage, it's probably never going to be a mainstream treatment.
In fact, Jasper, who we had mentioned was selling worms, he and his wife actually fled the US because they were being investigated by the FDA.
Wow.
And so, as an answer to this kind of problem of the live worm, what we're seeing is people like Paul, his team, other researchers, they're trying to develop the proteins hookworms produce to heal your gut or quiet your immune system. They're trying to take those proteins, make them in a lab, and then put them in a pill form. But no one knows what the timetable for that is. And so for now, you really are just stuck with having to get a hookworm.
And there are some sort of more black market where people are actually selling them and you can buy them. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for people, partially for the reason because you're paying money for something which hasn't really been rigorously tested and hasn't gone through the regulatory processes that other medications need to go through.
And so, yeah, that's where it's at.
Okay, I gotta go. But my last question is, Molly, should I get a worm?
I mean, dude, if I was you and I was in pain, I would try and figure out how to get a worm or get into a clinical trial. Can you fly to Australia and get into one of Paul's?
I think that...
I'll tell you the areas that they're doing it in. The big research areas are like the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand. You got any trips there planned soon?
No, I'm just, just those lucky people over there that get worms,
Well, you could always do what Jasper did, which is just go walk around in some poop and pick up, hookworms plus roundworms plus tapeworms. That's an option.
No, that's not. I'm not gonna roll in human feces.
That's a level of desperate you're not at.
That's not how desperate I am.
Okay, well, Australia it is then. Okay, hitting stop.
Okay.
Hitting
Yeah.
Hitting stop.
Okay, thank you, Molly Webster, for the update.
You're welcome.
Update was produced by Matt Kilty with help from Rebecca Rand. It was edited by Ariane Wack and fact-checked by Diane Kelly.
And we want to thank Pat Walters, Jad Abumrad, Robert Kolwich, and the whole 2009 Parasite team that put that episode together. If you want to listen to the entire Parasite episode, you can go check it out on our website.
And for everything else Radio Labby, please subscribe to our totally FDA-approved newsletter. All right, we'll be right back.
In 20 years.
20 years.
No, just next week.
Yeah, we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm from the Bay Area, California, and here are the staff credits. Radiolab is hosted by Lulu Miller and Latif Nasser. Soren Wheeler is our executive editor. Sarah Sandbach is our executive director. Our managing editor is Pat Walters. Dylan Keefe is our director of sound design. Our staff includes Jeremy Bloom, W. Harry Fortuna, David Gable, Maria Paz Gutierrez, Sindhu Naina Sambandan, Matt Keelty, Mona Modgaoker, Alex Neeson, Sarah Kari, Natalia Ramirez, Rebecca Rand, Anissa Vitze, Ariane Wack, Molly Webster, and Jessica Young, with help from Gabby Santis. Our fact-checkers are Diane Kelly, Emily Krieger, Natalie Middleton, Angeli Mercado, and Sophie Samai.
Hey, Radiolab. Michael, Tacoma, Washington. Leadership support for Radiolab science programming is provided by the Simons Foundation and the John Templeton Foundation. Foundational support for Radiolab was provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.
Big news! Radiolab is headed to the Tribeca Festival podcast stage for a special live show in NYC. We'll be headlining the podcast program with this one-night-only live show at the festival's 25th anniversary. Come out on June 9th. I think I can safely promise that it will be sweeter than anything you have ever seen or heard. Tickets are available now at tribecafilm.com/audio. That's tribecafilm.com/audio. Hey, this is Radiolab. I'm Latif Nasser, and today we're resurfacing a quite provocative episode we originally reported in 2014. Now, that sounds like a long time ago until you start listening and you start to realize how many parallels there are between 2014 and this moment right now. Outrageous healthcare costs, war in the Middle East, climate change. In every one of these cases, the specifics that they're referring to have changed, but the overall picture remains depressingly the same. Honestly, since it came out, I still think about these stories. I still remember them all the time, especially the last one. I would say this episode is one of my all-time top 10 Radiolab episodes. I hope you feel the same way, whether you are hearing it for the first time or hearing it for the 10th time. Here it goes. Worth.
Wait, you're listening?
You're
listening
to Radiolab.
Radio
From
WNYC.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Feeling
I'm
full of worth?
I'm feeling full of value.
Well, in that spirit, I'm Jad Abumrah.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab, and today,
3 very different stories that try to put a dollar value. Million is okay. $1 million.
$7. $10,000.
Yeah, I would say $5.
On things
that seem
Priceless.
priceless.
Is it really?
Okay, so start at the top.
Bring on the pressure.
So all right, we're going to start the show with a story from our producer, Molly Webster,
I don't remember any of it.
who we might actually want to rename Molly Wongster, because she recently got herself into some serious numericizing. Actually, it didn't start as a wonky thing. It started actually with some medical journals.
Yeah, that was interesting because it was some of the most poetic writing I've seen out of doctors ever. One journal article said, what would one more month mean to a 37-year-old mother who has 4 children? Or what would one more month mean if you are a 67-year-old who's about to go traveling around the world? People were just kind of drifting these questions out there.
All these questions seem to circle around a seemingly simple story of the pricing of a drug, cancer drug.
And the story, if you really want to tell it from the beginning, it begins with this guy named Leonard.
Leonard Saltz. I'm a medical oncologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center.
Which is here in New York, and it's one of the largest cancer centers in the country.
I mean, we have 17 doctors here who treat colon cancer.
Just for colon cancer.
I treat a very large number of patients.
It's a huge hospital, and one of the things Leonard's been noticing in the last, decade is cancer drug prices have just gone through the roof.
I mean, we have drugs out there that are many hundreds of dollars per pill.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, just wait. Let's see. Where does this start? It's June in 2012. Leonard Saltz is at a conference, and at this conference is a pharmaceutical company called Sanofi, and they give a presentation about a new drug that they have.
A drug called Zaltrap. And Zaltrap is a drug that, without getting into the science too much, targets the blood supply to the tumor.
It cuts off the blood supply, which means the tumor can't grow.
That's the scientific hypothesis.
So this new drug is presented, and they present the data.
And they showed that the survival difference
between the people who got Zaltrap and the people who didn't
was 1.4 months or 42 days.
In other words, if you take this drug, you could get 42 more days of life on average, which means you could get 3 more days, you could get no days, you could get 42, or you could live another 3 years.
42 days.
Down to the
yeah.
fine grain.
Oh, please. I could show you some graphs that have been put up at meetings that show survival curves calculated out to 2 decimal places in terms of months. So I'm looking at
That's not a tenth of a
100th of a month. 100th of a month. That's a little over 7 hours. Pretty amusing, actually.
Why would you?
It's pseudo precision.
Pseudo precision.
At any rate.
Anyways, after the conference, the FDA approves the drug, and basically, once the FDA approves the drug, public insurance has to take it, and then the private insurance companies just follow suit, which means you get prescribed the drug and people pay for it.
And what does the drug cost?
That's the thing.
It costs
Roughly
$30,000 for a 3-month course.
Wow.
So
Leonard's like, wow, that is expensive. And there was already another drug on the market, did the same thing, and it cost half as much. To put that in context, this is just one drug that's $11,000 a month. A normal cancer patient might take dozens of drugs.
there are anti-nausea medicines that are sometimes used that are in the range of $90 to $100 a tablet. You take a tablet once a day for 3 days. One needs growth factors to help support the white blood cell count, which you sometimes need in chemo. Those can be $5,000 every 2 to 3 weeks. If you need antibiotics to treat infections, those aren't cheap. And then you need a pharmacist to prepare it. They're labor intensive. You need tubing and equipment and needles to give it. You need trained nurses to administer it. You need doctors to take care of the patients. And don't forget there's a cost for a CAT scan or MRI. And then, of course, someone's got to pay for the real estate, the heat, and the lights. None of those prices are figured into it. Okay? I'm just giving you the cost of the drug.
So Leonard calls up one of his colleagues.
My name is Peter Bach. I'm a physician at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Peter is the number cruncher of the group. He does the statistical analysis of, the cost of care. And Len grabbed him and ran him through all the data.
And we walked through the out-of-pocket expenses for Medicare beneficiaries. Medicare beneficiaries, if they don't have additional insurance, 20 cents of every dollar they pay out of pocket.
And that number sort of hit him because he realized for Medicare patients, they'd be paying something like $2,000 out of pocket every month for just this drug.
It's $2,200 if I remember the number correctly.
For a lot of Medicare patients,
That's all of their money. Never mind other drugs. That's when I thought we should go public with it.
Memorial Sloan Kettering, they decide to boycott this drug.
Now,
I'm just stopping you because when you guys made that decision, that feels like a big deal.
it did feel like a big deal, and it felt like a big enough deal that we decided to write the op-ed piece in the New York Times.
They write an op-ed in the Times that basically says, look, this is crazy. $11,000 a month for a drug that maybe gives you 42 more days of life?
Is that worth it? And a little less than a month after the op-ed piece came out,
The company that makes Zaltrap,
they went to individual doctors' offices, sent representatives, and said, we are offering a 50% discount.
They cut the price in half just like that?
Yep,
nationwide or like just in this area?
nationwide.
It was sort of incredible.
We reached out to Sanofi to talk about the price of Zaltrap, and they declined to comment. But in a statement that they released when this whole Zaltrap thing happened, they said that they incur so many costs for researching and developing and bringing a drug to market that is what their pricing is based on. Leonard doesn't disagree,
We need these companies. They're the ones developing the drugs.
which aren't easy to develop. I mean, Leonard gave us just one example.
If we talk about colon cancer,
He says for years there was only one drug on the market called 5FU.
5FU was patented in August of 1957. It was from 1957 until 1996 that a second drug came along.
That's how long it takes to develop a good drug, or
In that interim, there were over 70 drugs that were tried and failed.
I feel like I don't give it enough credit because that just astounded me.
It's very, very hard.
And that, according to Leonard, is one of the reasons why prices are just going to keep going up.
But sooner or later, this system is going to fall apart. And at what point does society say, there isn't an infinite number of dollars that we can commit to our healthcare system?
It's funny because I had this interesting reaction to the word society. Because all of a sudden I thought, like, why is not like a crazy death panel way, but I thought, why is society involved in my conversation with my doctor about if I want to take this drug that may give me another month and a half of life?
Why is society involved? Because you're not paying. Unless you have hidden resources I'm aware of, probably couldn't afford $10,000 to $15,000 a month in drug bills. Someone else has to pay that.
obviously, he says, it's your insurance. I mean, say you're part of a policy that has 1,000 members.
Let's say that the premium for that is $100. So we got $100, 1,000 people, we got ourselves $100,000. Okay, so we now have $100,000 to take care of that 1,000 people.
For that month.
For whatever amount of time. If now one person comes up with a healthcare cost, let's say it's for a month, that is $100,000 in that month, everybody else is in trouble. There's no money left.
So, they write this op-ed saying, like, prices are too high and the drugs are not that great. And sort of the next, like, notable wave is, there's this journal called Blood, which is really big to anybody that works in a community
It's a
that
journal
has, like,
called Blood?
Yeah.
How did we not know about this when we made the Blood show?
Oh, I knew. Just kept it in here.
Anyhow.
So yes, there's a journal called Blood, which is basically like the journal for anybody that works in a field that has to do with blood. And what happens is, like, 100 doctors get together and they co-sign an editorial, which basically says, we totally agree with everything you guys are saying, but we have an even bigger issue. You know, with Zaltrap, you're talking about an expensive drug that maybe doesn't really do that much. It's kind of easy, even though it had never been done before, to say, we're not going to use this. What all of these doctors in the Blood editorial are saying, what do you do when you have a really expensive drug, but it's really, really good? It's like a drug you actually want to take.
Is that like a one day in the future we will face this kind of question?
No, that is like a now, today question.
The most important new medicine approved this year.
Everyone I talked to pointed me to this new drug.
Sovaldi.
It's known as Sovaldi.
Sovaldi. Why many in the medical community are calling the new medication
The blockbuster.
Sovaldi came on the market last December.
So that's December 2013.
That's correct.
This is Bruce.
Bruce Mole. I'm the editor of Commonwealth Magazine.
He's written about Sovaldi, and here's the basic story, right? It is a drug that treats
Hepatitis C.
which is caused by a virus.
And the disease itself goes to work on your liver. It inflames it, it scars it.
It can cause liver cancer, cirrhosis, it can be fatal. And for the longest time, the treatments that they had just really weren't that great, or they just had wretched side effects. But along comes Sovaldi, and it's one pill, 12 weeks. You take it with some other antiviral meds. It is a super simple treatment option.
And the side effects are very minimal.
Like this, it was like kind of like the savior drug. And so a lot of doctors start to prescribe it.
In the first half of 2014, 70,000 people in the country, in the United States, were treated. And it had a 95% rate of cure. In other words,
Holy cow,
the virus
that's
was
big.
eradicated. That's very big.
But in fitting with our story,
This drug costs $1,000 a pill.
for like one pill that I take,
One a day.
which, as you can imagine, it angered a lot of people with Hep C. In total, it costs $84,000. And if you think about the fact that in 2014, we know at least 70,000 people got this drug.
Then you're starting to talk about serious money.
Wait, I just want to say that I just timesed out 70,000 times 84,000, and I got something with 7 zeros in it. It's 588, and then there's 7 zeros, which is like $5 billion.
Yes. Yeah.
The big question is how states will pay for what could be upwards of.
And so we have a situation where states are basically having to ration.
Yeah.
Say in Massachusetts,
Most of the insurers currently are requiring some liver damage before you can take the drug.
similar restrictions are happening in other states. Florida, it's happening in Oregon, Illinois.
The doctor says the only option may be to wait until you're even sicker.
And then there's Arizona. Out of the entire state, public insurance only approves 180 people for treatment.
Well, just 180?
Just 180. Now, when I talk to a representative of the company that makes the drug,
Greg Alton, Executive Vice President for Corporate and Medical Affairs for Gilead Sciences.
he says you got to keep in mind, this is not a chronic care situation. This is a
Cure. Here you're actually curing a person of a disease. We're talking about 12 weeks of therapy, period. That's it. And you're done and you've cured somebody.
So he says This is a one-time deal. This is like one-time $84,000, and then you're done. Think about all the years you'll live without having an illness. Then you'll see.
Over a 20-year period, the savings that will accrue to the system by having a patient cured of hepatitis C.
He also said it's important to understand that every hepatitis C sufferer is not going to hit the system at the same time. So all of the cost is spread out, right? Which is totally true, but I think there's like this bigger picture here, and Bruce points it out too.
It's sort of like a precursor of what could come because these companies are developing drugs all the time. What if you could get a drug, but it was very expensive to treat diabetes?
And then you're talking tens of millions of people.
An enormous segment of the population.
Even if just a fraction of them want a drug that's $1,000 per day, that's practically our entire US budget.
What do you do in that case? A drug comes along like that and throws everything out of whack.
This is the part where I really sort of got hooked in, where it's like, how do you answer this question? Is it that, at a certain point you just draw a line and you say, beyond this point, we're not paying?
But beyond what point?
Exactly. I mean, that's the hard part. Like, how good does a treatment have to be for you to say, this is worth the price that it's been set at?
I don't think we reject it out of hand, but I don't think
I got into this a bit with Leonard. In the case of Zaltrap, they said, all right, 42 days, that much money, we're not going to do it. But would it have been different if it was 50 days or 100? Is that enough? I'm sure you want to be talking in years, but I guess the question is, like, what would be is there a magic line for you?
I can't personally determine it for everybody. I wouldn't presume to try. But ultimately, as a society, we're going to have to reach an understanding of what that cut point is because we can't afford not to.
And the question that sort of bubbles out of this conversation is, what is one more year or one more month or one more day of life worth to us?
Are we willing to pay $1,000 for an extra day of life? Well, what about $100,000 for an extra day of life?
People like to say, yeah, so what's the value of a human life? And the answer is, boy, that's a complicated question, but a really important one because nobody thinks it's infinite.
He said that, and I was like, okay, it's not zero and it's not infinite. Is there an answer like in the middle? And so I started looking around. I don't know, I guess I was wondering, has anyone actually thought about this? And so I started looking around, and what I realized was that the World Health Organization actually, I guess they almost have a number, but it's a number per country. They have the recommendation that countries spend, it's going to get gobbledygooky, but just bear with me.
Yeah.
The countries spend 1 to 3 times the GDP per capita, which is like the gross domestic product per individual.
So take the entire fat ball of money that is in a country and divide it per individual?
Divide it by the individuals, and then you spend 1 to 3 times that on one more good year of life.
And what would that be for us?
So for the U.S., that's about 50 to 150,000.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And does that have any teeth? That recommendation?
It legally doesn't have any teeth, but it has teeth in the sense that doctors in the U.S. are actually going to start using this WHO number to evaluate medical treatments for cardiology. They said they were going to do this in a paper, and it was kind of very quiet, very subtle. But in other countries, this conversation is very loud, actually. It happens at the government level. They're also passing out surveys where they're asking citizens, what is your limit on how much you want to spend on one more good year of life?
Have they done that here?
As
Ever?
far as I know, no.
Why not?
Because the last time we tried to talk about cost in medicine, it ended up in the whole
Death panels?
death panels
Death panels, or so-called death panels.
thing. And I don't know, I just wondered, right, into the mess of it. Hey, Times Square. If I actually tried to go out and ask this question in a very basic way, how would people respond? Excuse me, can I ask you a question? What is a year of life worth?
Wow, what a question.
That's deep. Can I think about it?
That's a tough one, but
I was really surprised at how seriously people took the question.
Man, what is a year of life worth?
That was the first thing I noticed. Then the next thing was, No one could answer the question until I had answered like a million questions of theirs.
Am I gonna die tomorrow?
Yes.
Where do I get that year? Do I get it at the beginning, the middle, or the end?
How would I spend that year of life?
Good. It would be a good year of life.
A good year of life depends.
Is this like a pie in the sky kind of answer?
They wanted to know, would they be emotionally happy, alone, with friends or family? Where did they get the money? Did they borrow the money? Did they have to pay the money back? Were they dying? Was it an emergency? Were other people also trying to get money at the same time? Because then there'd be like a rush on the money in America.
Oh, interesting. Did you actually ever end up getting numbers?
I did get numbers, but they were
At least $10,000. $15,000.
13
$250,000, $7.
all over the place.
Yeah, I would say $5.
$10 million.
$44,000.
Interesting. One woman said 10 million.
$10 million for a year? It's irresponsible.
Well, you're asking me about my personal choice,
$10 million?
not about a public policy question.
What, do you have any way of...
Big news! Radiolab is headed to the Tribeca Festival podcast stage for a special live show in NYC. We'll be headlining the podcast program with this one-night-only live show at the festival's 25th anniversary. Come out on June 9th. I think I can safely promise that it will be sweeter than anything you have ever seen or heard. Tickets are available now at tribecafilm.com/audio. That's tribecafilm.com/audio. Hey, Latif here. I have now been working in podcasts for over 15 years. And one thing that still consistently surprises me about this industry is the enduring appeal of true crime podcasts. No judgment if you are a fan of true crime. I just personally have never really gotten into them. I feel like they just make me paranoid. But I feel like the episode we are about to replay, which is one of the all-time top Radiolab episodes, is the closest thing Radiolab has ever done to a true crime episode. It's got crimes, they are gut-wrenching, they are true, but the episode is really trying to do something, I think, bigger. It's trying to grapple with these profound questions, like, what makes someone bad? And are they different from the rest of us? And how do you live in a world where people do bad things for seemingly no good reason at all? Also, if you listen close, you'll hear a cameo from me. This is one of the first Radiolab episodes I was ever on. You can treat it like a little Sonic Where's Waldo. Anyway, here it is, The Bad Show.
Wait, you're listening?
You're
listening
to Radiolab.
Radio
From
WNYC.
Rewind.
Hello, David.
Yes, hello.
This is Pat.
Oh, hi, Pat.
Let's begin with this story from our producer, Pat Walters.
Pat, go ahead.
Okay, so I heard this one from this guy named David.
His name is David Buss.
2 S's. He's a psychology professor
at the University of Texas at Austin.
And this particular story, it comes from a book that David wrote. Could you just tell me the little story that you begin your book with?
Okay, yes. This is one of the things that's this was one of the things that sparked my interest in the topic of murder.
The whole thing happened several years ago.
I had a very good friend,
another professor at the university,
and I used to socialize with him and his wife. And one evening they were throwing a party and invited me over. And so when I went to the party was already in full swing. When I got there, walked in and asked his wife where this friend of mine was. And she got a disgusted look on her face and said that he was up in the bedroom. And so I went up to the bedroom to find him, and he was in a rage.
In a rage? How? Like, you walk into the room, what do you find?
Well, he started fuming that his wife had dissed him. And
what did she do?
She expressed disapproval about his clothing choices.
She made fun of his shirt or something.
But did it publicly in front of her friends. So it was he felt publicly humiliated.
And while David's sitting in the bedroom with this friend, the guy looks up at him and he says,
"I'm going to kill her."
How did he say it? Like, quietly, or
like through his teeth, you know, I'm gonna kill her.
David had always known this guy to be pretty mild-mannered.
But he is a large, very strong man, with a black belt in karate. I knew what he was capable of. So I suggested that we go out for a walk, and I basically spent the next half hour walking around with him, trying to cool him off.
And eventually, he did.
He just calmed down.
And did you go back to the party then and, like, continue dinner partying for a while?
Yeah, I did.
And he did too?
Yeah.
Radio
From
I've been living with a shadow overhead. I've been sleeping with a cloud above my bed. I've been lonely for so long. Trapped in the past, I just can't seem to move on.
I've been hiding all my hopes and dreams away, just in case I ever need 'em again someday. I've been setting aside time to clear a little space in the corners of my mind. All I wanna do is find a way back into love. I can't make it through without a way back into love. I've been watching, but the stars refuse to shine. I've been searching, but I just don't see the signs. I know that it's out there. There's gotta be something for my soul somewhere. I've been looking for someone to shed some light, not somebody just to get me through the night. I could use some direction, and I'm open to your suggestions.
All I wanna do is find our way back into love. I can't make it through without our way back into love. And if I open my heart again, I guess
在变，但那些魂萦梦系的秘密不曾忘记。让我们唱着一些无聊的歌曲，谈着还不
这了哈。好，再来呢，舰长寿司吧哈。舰长的股价哈，舰长呢，舰长挑了这个当成上周，我记得上周吧，上周的那个股价练习是礼拜一还是礼拜4，我忘了哈。挑这个啊，然后他把这个画在这，好，这个是挂了的哈。我们来看看这个该怎么办哈？还有这个该怎么办？这个我没话说，它就长这样哈。这叫蛋黄哥哈，它就是这个样子哈。但是这2个地方有错啊，出了什么？你说这个没错吗？这个错不多啊，不是那么明显，但这个有错啊，这有错，这有错，错在哪？你们看得出来吗？来哈。能不能用说的来说明股价错在哪？如果你们做得到哦，那我就很厉害。用讲的可以说告诉你股价错在哪。好，不要看别的哦，跨家它错在哪？就会有一种那个被抓出来鞭尸的感觉。不会，编的才会厉害啊、哦，就是要有那种在众目睽睽之下那个承担这个压力。所以你们要是被我挑出来改的哈，不要说啊怎么办害羞这样。害羞是一个情绪 ，OK 的，但是你要承受它，你就不会忘记它。不然的话呢，你就是会，就是我们私下来3、5好友聊天，他说哦原来是这个问题哦，原来我在这边画错，2天你就忘了啦。但是要是像这样子，就直接在那个类似在讲台上讨论那个错误，就不会忘啊、哦。你顶多未来画不出来，但还没办法画到很到位，但你不会忘记这个错。打土是不会哈。好，这个呢，我们先这张照片呢，哈，它有很多的讯息是被遮住了。好，比如说这个有个缸哈，就是一个玻璃缸遮住了，然后这个地方呢也遮住了，所以呢，这样舰长判断错误，直接这边就是这样子啊，这里不会是这样啊。我转一下哈，这个又要再谈到一件古老的记忆，这个记忆也没有多古老了哈，8年前、9年前，有一点古老哈。那个这也是我对于画素描这件事情能不能增进你的骨架能力产生的第一次疑问，那个疑问是很深刻的、哦。我那时候我退伍第1年，我们刚好跟联成电脑配合的那个时期，然后那个时候台中的老师哦，那个时候我认识一个老师哦，他是那种传统功底很强那种，他会用喷枪，手工的那种哦，你说不是什么画笔 photo 里面哪一支叫喷枪，不是那个东西，是真的传统喷枪。然后他的那个素描底子很好，他就是可以看了照片把它画到一样，他是有这个本事的人哦。那我当时就觉得他画言情风格，那我当然就会觉得说，哎，那应该很多骨架都不是问题。在有一次我办了一个聚会，在台中市火车站前面那个麦当劳，我办了一个聚餐，然后有同学问到他这个动作，就这个动作，就像那个卧佛啊，泰国那个卧佛那个动作，然后让他画，他画出来骨架之后，我看了瞠目结舌，错的有够离谱。所以那个时候我才觉得，哎，画素描原来无法锻炼一个人的骨架。那个时候我就产生这一个了解。如果你没有锻炼骨架，单纯看着画，你是不会画骨架的。这个我已经反复验证过很多人，我看了很多人，就是他就是素描练一辈子，骨架还是不会画，因为你练素描的时候，你不理解你到底你在练什么。你一定要知道你练素描，你要锻炼什么？你可能要锻炼观察力，你可能要锻炼你对光影的感知、认识，锻炼对形状的掌握，或者你要锻炼你对骨架的了解、体态了解都可以。但是你要知道你现在练你的 觉得你也可以很屌，这样想法是错的。绝对都能够练，但你练的当下，你要去思考，我看到这个东西为什么它肩膀这么摆，原来是这么摆，摆在这边，原来这个动作肩膀放这里是对的，然后原来它的结构应该怎么样，你要思考这些，不然练都是白练。要思考每一个你在练习的点，切记哈。素描呢，其实锻炼的点非常的多，但是不能流于你在锻炼的当下，你没有思考，这样就没有用哦。当然，这个一定不会只有素描这样啦，所有的练习都一样，只是素描啊，它省掉一个东西，就是创意这件事情，创造这件事情，你不需要管，因为它东西摆在你面前，不然它就不是我们理解的那个比较普遍的素描概念，对不对？因为你看着画，所以你不用创造它。但是平常时候你像刚才开一个档案在画的时候，你是要创造它的，所以这个创造的这个动作可以逼迫你去挤东西，从你的脑中，从你所有的技术的仓库里面把东西给挤出来。它的锻炼价值其实是另一个层面。我认为两种未来你就是能够练都要练，只是说时间不够的话，那我个人比较偏重从无到有去画，而不是看东西。看东西是另外一种补足的练习，这并没有褒贬任何一种练习法，这是一种先后次序以及你有多少时间而做的决定。这个你们听听了哈。你时间不够的话，你说每一样练习都要练，那真的也很不实际哦。来，这里怎么样呢？脖子，看这里，这个是舰长的，这是我的。然后呢，这里呢，肩膀这样过来，但是呢，如果你要把它当一个有弹性的东西的话，像这样，肩骨在这，手臂的位置呢，不要把它当直的看，要当弧的看，当一个弧度来看。好，这个时候呢，跳过这只手臂，先不画它，先来搞定身体。身体的话呢，要抓哪里呢？抓肩膀。如果你抓得到肩膀，就抓肩膀；抓不到肩膀，就抓腋下，就抓下颌，把下颌垫那个像这样垫出来啊、一定要垫好这个位置，一定要，你一定可以判断出来。如果你不抓这个位置，你只是想办法从那边慢慢连出来，或者从那边虚抓几下，你这边都是死哦。这都我本来是想要打问号，又想要打叉，就会变成刚刚这个东西。好，一定要点出，把这个下颌位置给垫出来哦。锁骨呢就会出来，然后呢，这个时候呢，我们就可以把这个腋下就可以往这方向切。我刚刚讲很重要那个三角肌跟二头肌的这个接缝处，这条线切了出来，你身体才有保障。好，再来往下这边，胸腔、腰、臀，我就不看那张照片了，因为我觉得那个照片动作，我练过很多遍了。起来啊，然后中线要定好，可以转体，没错。来，胸腔朝底下 ，OK， 腹腔朝镜头这边来，所以有经过一个转体。转体就靠中轴线，中间这个轴线去转，靠过来，好，这样呢就搞定很多了。好，接下来呢，我看一下照片，这里是怎么描述的？没有描述哈，那就是舰长自己想象，对不对？好，刚好讲错了哈。哎，帅破出现了哈，来，帅破要不要练图呢？你对合掌村姑有没有兴趣呢？一定觉得没你的事，对不对？帅破，你怎么会没有存在感呢？你没有存在感，那老师帮你刷存在感啊，塞把你刷存在感，来刷一个哈，怒刷一波，来，帅破合掌村姑。这条腿，我就用舰长这个位置哈，伸下来往旁边，当然它也可以就是往正面，要看动作的选择哦。 这里先不画，我等一下来问这个问题哦。另外一条腿呢有一个秘密哦，横切线这边也要做足哦，那横切线都要不做足的话，一样哦，叫取经四人组哦，送刑具到我面前。好 ，BT 也画一个合掌村姑吧。哦，这个合掌村姑呢，看来今天会是个大丰收哦。目前知道就3个要画了，对不对？卡比、绿星、帅破、BT 4大天王啊。合掌村姑不错啊，这个梗。来看这，好，现在请问一下哦，这条线很重要。这条线呢有2个，我画2种选择给你看啊。看好喽，这条线啊，这是我们的骨关节内侧这个骨关节的横切线。好，它呢是剑长这样，这是选择1，是还是我这样？这是选择2，你们觉得差在哪？1或2，你们挑一个，你觉得哪个对？当然了，现在已经排山倒海了，会觉得是剑长画错，我的是对的，对哈。看一下这个差异，切在这边弧度不足，腿会往侧边走。如果像我这样从这边顶出来，这个会决定中线啊，就腿的中线会决定在就是身体中间这边，所以这样子才对。然后呢，因为这个正中间这个凸起的地方呢，比较靠近那个整个我们腹部这边正面这边的话，腿呢它的朝向就会比较朝向镜头。好，那我这边用蓝线把刚刚的结果画一下，你看蓝线对不对？这样子，来看一下，如果是像刚刚剑长这样子的话，腿呢会朝侧边出去，那旁边这边已经有地面了，所以你朝这边走是死路一条，它是死胡同，你转不出去。如果你今天是朝这个方向，朝偏正面这边，好，腿的中线我们撇一下，这样呢，我们这条腿呢就会往镜头这边，然后膝盖就会看到这个正面，这样后面这条腿呢就可以很舒服的放在地面上，就没事了。所以关键在这里，这个突出，它会引导让你的腿朝向镜头正面这边来，不要傻傻的弄成这样，那是找死哦，跟着舰长一起沉哦。回避太高，谁回避的？谁回避的？女神对不对？小郑，你回避什么？你人生怎么可以回避？第5个画合掌村姑的就是小郑了。小郑，我知道你可以表现很好。
哈喽，你好，这里是杰叔，哎，这台地表最强 B35，嗨，我说的是装机教程地表最强啊。装完之后，这台机子最终还是要拿出来飞一飞的。今天其实主要是给它调一套全新的 PID 的参数，在这已经飞了很多排练了，就是它还是老样子啊。这台 B35它调 PID 非常的简单，默认的情况下稍作微调就已经相当。
你们知道我在改这个时候我不会看那个吗？对不对？然后我就这样眼睛一瞥过来，看谁这样像是一个自己作死的那种，我就直接挑他了。这样也中。蛮多人知道我会玩那个就是老游戏啊，特别玩什么呢？就是射击游戏，就是那种弹幕游戏。然后我为什么要玩弹幕游戏呢？就是比较容易集中精神啊，而且很快就玩完。那你刚刚那个小郑说这样也中，我有时候那个直升机一台，子弹打到这个后面，削到一点点，然后爆掉，我内心也会觉得干了，这样也中，我都会中，你也会中啊。好，再来呢就是关键这一块啊，这一块问题在哪里呢？手画质没问题啊，但是我比较推荐是稍微有点起伏。
飞了1次2次了吧？1次挂运动相机、测评运动相机那一期，是不是各种收不到信？今天呢，你看我在这也拿它做了很多测试，哎，各种 GPS，各种收不到信，你敢信？好吧，话不多说，我们飞起来。
虽然它是直的，但是呢，实际上它的横切线呢，它会让它在整个空间表面上有一些远近变化。
欧式 Pro 版本、小欧式版本、模拟图层的版本。OK， 我们就在这里起飞吧。
好，然后呢，这个有多弯？因为它这边是照片，所以你看不到它的那个中间的结构。如果他穿上服装，你就会看到可能它会有些袖口什么的弧度会够，这个没有。那就要靠我们自己在做骨架锻炼的时候把这些横线切好。然后一定要记得哈，我并不赞成那个你们在这个阶段画肌肉，画那些什么胸肌、腹肌什么，我觉得那个都不要。好好的把体态就是形而已，外形而已，把体态跟这些结构切线切好，这个比较实际，知道吗？好，再来呢，另一条腿啊，你看那个风骚的舰长，还让它翘起来，很有趣。舰长应该不在了啊，然后就一直被我损。舰长要不在的话，应该会出事。
因为太多玩家呢吐槽说，升级了换新版本以后，这个欧式 Pro 的真伪效果和出片效果虽然是完美了，
好，改完了，好，看一下这骨架。
卖大属性却又丢失了，就是你们都体验过了，炸机之后这个镜头呢会飞出去，所以呢，我们决定
看看差异吧，像这样跟这样。
好，我们此刻呢正在飞的是这个，
我就尽量画在差不多位置，除非错的很离谱，好，不然我就尽量画在一起。好，舰长在对不对啊？不好意思啊，我想你是不是沉的这样啊？跟着你的战舰一起沉的。啊，这个呢，出错在哪里？你觉得呢？你可以这样子瞬间这样拐弯的吗？不行啊。如果你要画这个动作的话，在能够满足大部分条件不变的情况下，这个肩膀要提高，头的位置就要平，稍微改一下，然后这个顶的肩膀上提，这个对了。好，然后呢，这边不要这样急转弯，还是人就不能这么错哈。慢慢转，当然也不是说转很久才转出来哦，不是这样的，你要把胸腔位置先长度先定好，到这边慢慢的压下来，再转过来，懂吗？然后呢，再来我们来看看横切整个躯体的横切线，如果你要这样子，不是不可以，所以你这个腹部这一条横切，你要这样转可以，但是呢，你所有的线条包含胸下的话，这大概是我们肋骨位置。线条就不能再往下这么圆，你要把它变平，甚至是有点往上凸。胸部呢就要整个由下往上画，线条走向要这样走，不再是你刚刚这种走法，这样会画不好。开玩笑，这种东西我在练，有时候冰上一根才2块，好不好？好，那再来呢，这边会出错，出什么错呢？因为你腹部是这样一圈一圈往上顶，这个时候呢，肩膀要挡住脖子，这不是废话吗？你原本的是脖子都要跑到前面来的，所以这个叫做什么斜方肌，对不对？会很不明显，会被挡在后面，所以脖子位置可能会在这，然后斜方肌会非常不明显。那这么复杂，人生就是这么复杂啊！就像你开船也一样啊。好，这个身体有没有转体？有哦，转的大了哈。
最接近默认状况的。好了，这里呢不多做更多夸张和过分的推崇和描述了啊，因为这台机
然后给下半身一点空间，
足以说明问题了。所以呢，为什么在我那期长达40分钟的 B35的装机视频里面，我也一直想表达说，已经过去了2年的时间了，
出来，
至今呢都没有一台新的365寸机型出来，大幅度的碾压 B35的性能，这个足以说明它的经典。也正因为如此呢，
再来就是这2条腿了啊，你原本的腿。我觉得你原本这个图接上，直接接上去，我觉得问题就不太大哈。像这个是腿抬起来，所以膝盖先顶出来。看一下这个舰长一定要练会这个，你不可以再这样，不可以，你 你要让它倾斜一边，有看到吗？整个斜一边，这就是日韩腿，你一定要会，让整个腿要整个斜一边弯。你内侧这个呢，你要是对称的话，你就永远体会不了这一点。一个直的，一个凸的，创造这种倾斜感，把日韩腿练起来。你的外轮廓，人物的外轮廓比较不够灵活，所以日韩腿首要先练。练会日韩腿的话呢，你的轮廓就会灵活起来，你的角色就会不也就能 Q 了。好，这个呢往下、往上都可以，因为这个膝盖要怎么弯，这个是都可以的哈。往下当然脚踝就要改，往下。好，然后呢这边呢就有个免不了的，就是膝盖上这个弧度要很大，像这样。再来这条腿嘞，那就要看动作决定。你可以把膝盖放这里，放这里也可以哈。如果你要放这个位置，跟你原本的这个画起来差异倒是还好。一定要记得，弧度只要像这样由下往上，就是下压上，下面每个结构要往上盖起来。看一下我现在的蓝线，由下而上盖住，这个几乎原本是往下盖，也会被迫由下而上的盖上去。胸部呢由下而上盖住，肩膀由下而上盖住脖子，就是由下而上一圈就往上盖，记得，不然就剥夺你的爵位哈。弧度要够，这是什么横切线？不行啊，这个横切线。好，请你收下那个取经四人组的礼物。这个横切线看一下，要这么弯，粗细可以慢慢再校正。往后再缩，看懂了吗？下压上，要下压上，你就是在这边就直接断掉。上面呢，这里你的这个蓝线区的上半身还是上压下，然后呢下半身是下压上，那中间一定会断掉，一定会卡住。那有没有可能有两个都产生？有可能，动作因为人的骨骼是可以弯来弯去的，就是光脊椎就好几节，对不对？但是我们先考量的就是这个动作在观众眼中协调程度到哪。你说这个能不能往后摆？不要，放侧就好。这样往后的话，硬压上去的话很不协调。到这里，要出来再说，靠你了哈。然后这里嘞，顶好顶满，压上去，下压上。OK， 然后横切切好，横切这里一条，这样，都切给你看哦，好，然后头的位置上面放这里就不好。然后你们喜欢点这种眼睛，这眼睛是很有效率的哈，直接点出来这个面，它的面向朝向就一下就定好，这也 OK 哈，点。但是不要只是点好玩的哈，这个东西是那个你点它的时候，其实也同时间在表现横切的位置，所以我认为它要点得很准，不要觉得它只是个草图，对，上下歪一点没关系，一歪你横切就错。你这边会姑息它，你底下就不要保证都会对，不可能。所以尽量这种地方两眼要点，高度就一定要定好，不要歪，一歪就真的就是连环车祸了。好，这样看懂了吗，舰长？那再来的话呢，我们中间我们进行一段简短的教学哈。 这段教学呢，就是做一个手掌示范哈，然后也帮那个CG 班上过 CG 班的不管哪个梯次上过 CG 班的同学，然后整理一下，如果在彩图底下你画手掌的那个重点在哪边然后我要用彩稿画，好吧？这档案呢不用大这个我看一下什么规格就好，好，在我的那个手掌的教学，我看要不要直接让你们，这个可以我觉得应该 OK 的因为这个部分我也可以简单的展示一下我课程教学的时候手掌的示范稍等好，这是我的一个那个时候在做教学时候的一个步骤一个步骤解说这是上课时候的教材那这个教材其实就是一步一步带同学画，然后分析给大家看的好，那我在这边因为我都说了就是今天难得我就把它当成一个小小的一个课程示范上过 CG 班的同学，你趁机也可以思考复习一下然后你正要开始上课的同学，你也可以看看这个东西，做点准备然后还没体验过我课程你还不晓得我龙族数位的教学是什么样的，你这个时候也可以看一下来，这是手掌，对不对？这废话，这是手掌我知道。那手掌呢，有些时候会有因为各种角度的关系所以画起来呢，它没办法套同一个理论。就说你画这种叫做我们讲手心，手心面积最大的时候，它的判断法则一般是要看这一块掌心以及延伸出来的食指跟侧面开叉的这个拇指，你是要这样分析。你说本来就这样吗？当换成别的角度的时候呢，你会发现刚刚讲那一套没办法用。好，那掌心在哪里就是我们那个刚刚画了这么大一块掌心，在右下角这个算是侧边的手的时候，好像没办法画，好像没有办法把这理论套上去，对不对？好，其实关键就在于说你怎么诠释这一块掌心。像我们讲的手心角度，像这个叫手心角度，对不对？手心角度的话，就是代表这边手心这里面积最多的时候，那这一块呢是一个四边形。无论如何，一定要记得这个四边形然后它呢困难一点的时候呢，可能会像这样，这个手掌直接像按在桌面上，它上面这一块呢变得非常薄，而且整个面积压缩在一起实际上从这边画过来的话，其实就是一个强迫绘制。很多人不敢这么画，就说或者说你不会画，你说我不会画这种，就是把手压在这个掌面，就是那个桌面上这样压，我不会画，对不对？是你不敢画。说穿了，它的形状就是右边这一片而已，这一片你说单就形状你不会画吗？它就是一个梯形。小时候学过吧，数学课本上有吧，梯形对吗？就上底加下底乘高除2就会得到面积那个梯形。说真的，就是把这一个梯形表现出来，然后呢，再接着有一些其他的理论再套上去。好比说旁边长拇指，前面斜线地带长食指，食指要画的长吗？如果你把手掌往前伸的时候，这食指要变得很短，从原本这么长变得短短的，在这么短的一个范围内，想办法指甲塞上去，愿意硬逼自己这么做，你一定可以画出差不多的，之后再去优化它。所以从这种比较简单的角度画到稍微困难的角度，其实就是看你愿不愿意自我要求，强逼自己画一些你平常不画的形状。梯形你只有在数学课本上画成人物，画成那个手掌的时候，你发现你根本不会把过去很简单的地方套上来，这是一个心理障碍。硬逼就做得到愿意刻意练就可以那不是有一本书还蛮有名吗？前阵子网络上还蛮多人推荐，就是新闻媒体也报过这本书就是叫做刻意练习那我觉得这本书光标题看封面我都想看了但我还没时间书读的少，还没时间读真的要刻意练，愿意练就能够突破，不愿意练，再神的技巧在你眼前都是过眼云烟，顶多换得你一个哇这样而已，不可以要刻意练好，那它会有其他的角度，应用的时候会不太一样。好比这是侧面的时候呢，还是一样，手掌心的 这个四边形要做角度跟形状的改变，变得薄薄长长的，像这样。好，但这个情况下会多一个东西，会比较明显显著的，就是这一块地方，这一块三角形。这块三角形呢是从拇指、虎口跟这个手背这3个地方串起来，这个三角形它会忽然间跑出来，其他角度还没那么明显，但是像这个手的侧面它就会非常明显。好，然后就会像这样跑出来，然后我们就要去分析手指的其他位置。好，然后呢在这边就是这是一个锻炼的那个逻辑哈，就是说把手画弯。初学者是画不了3节的，初学者顶多画2节。那当然你说初学者是指什么情况下叫初学者？我认为画到蛮进阶的阶段都只会画2节，那2节就2节没关系，少1节真的不会死人，你就画2节，让你能够把一个手掌好好的 run 完一次又一次。那最重要，熟练到一个程度之后呢，你就会有余裕把长度空出来，再多1节，达到真正该有的3节。好。所以这是一个3节的手，那我们已经可以就是像我们现在当然是可以就是直觉就画出来，然后呢未来要能够画出这种指节感，每一节指节感觉包含指尖的细腻变化。那这个呢是一个进阶状态，一开始谁都是这样的，一开始大家都长这样，以后才能够像这样有指节的感觉，以及有指甲尖跟这个指腹这个差异，后来才会变出来。不要心急的变成这样，一开始能这样子就不错了。初学者我讲的初学者然后呢，再更进阶一点的话呢，未来呢要想办法利用各种手段、各种方法、各种你的条件，即使是线条也可以，想办法帮弯曲的指节处理出明确的亮跟暗，这是代表它受光状态不一样，可能光都从左上来，可能都是这样。好，然后因为转弯不同的那个指节的角度的关系，所以它会有一部分呢受光少，那你要把它的亮暗分出来。好，再来的话呢，往下这边看到就是我们在画手指头的时候，就是另外一个，就这也是上课才教的，实况几乎不太可能去提这个这就是指尖的画法，这个是手指的画法，手指就是一个长条状，对不对？不管你怎么称呼它那个长条状或者像面团一样面条一样，随便你怎么你记得住就可以。就一条东西，那这个指尖呢是画手指头的一个关键技术，因为我们有些时候要把手摆到这个角度来，那就特别困难，因为你无法画纵向的指尖。纵向指尖的关键就是这个，一个三角，一个圆当然这个是一个弧啦我们就把它讲成圆，有时候你好记注意一个三角，一个圆。这样子就可以组合出一个纵向的，就是把手指往你眼前这样吐过来的那个指尖，你就做得到。那在不一样的情况下，它可能会有角度的偏差有角度的差异。这个三角跟这个圆的相对关系呢，有时候就被压得比较扁，或者有时候呢会像这样稍微比较高一点，你就要看它的角度，看那个手肘戳向这个人的眼睛，戳过来的时候它的那个角度高低做这个调整就可以那在刚开始的认知阶段呢，你其实回到稍微上面讲的就是你对手掌的拆解，最基本的就是这个四边形打叉这一块，这是我们的那个掌心，上面有讲过了，它有可能会被压扁成像这种梯形，也有可能被往侧边压扁成这种像长方形一样为了要画侧面的手的时候，像压扁成长方形一样，有可能不管怎样，这一块的认知很重要。然后这一块呢，会有几条线一定要记得的。你画的时候，就算在画彩图，不画这几条线，基本上也是找死第一条线手腕一定要画出来，不管怎样一定要画出来，不要那个叫什么，不要太过自信的就说我不画这条线，我手腕有什么难的？我知道啊，我几岁，我国小画图，我这个东西我就早就略过了。你越快略过它，你就越容易犯一些错。那要我提醒你们的话呢，来。这么提醒实在是，但是我一定要来博拳这个就是手腕线不明显的时候，手就会特别小。我说博拳我不是已经没我的事了吗？我不是下台了这样没有，不好意思上来来，你就发现你的手腕、手臂跟那个手掌的变化差异很小。我光看这个，我都会觉得你一定没有认真的面对这条手腕线，好好到这边把它截断。四边形表现好，你就不会有手画的过小的问题。 手过小或者手掌姿态出不来的这个状况，这就是一个很好的例子，这绝对手腕线都不太顾的哈，这肯定是一整个色彩这样子喷过来，画的差不多之后再加上手镯哈，以我9星连珠的那个超能力，我认定应该是这样哈。博璇，就算你不是这样，你也必须在这个时候跟我说你就是这样哈，这样以后会对你好一点啊。好，那除了手腕线之外，再来呢，这个是拇指线。拇指的话呢，再往外这一块超重要，超重要。这一块三角形呢，就是什么呢？就是我们的虎口、拇指，还有那个就是我们的那个手掌心划分出来的这个三角形，这一块呢，我认为很重要，非常非常重要啊。如果说你们有任何人在课堂上做笔记什么的，我就说这地方要画满天星弄一堆星星这很重要。画手掌有些时候很多画烂掉，就这一块都不重视。好，来，博璇再来一次你的三角形在哪里？出不来，你有发现吗？对你来讲，你就是这样下来，让拇指喷出来，你没有这块三角形的概念，所以呢，在这边一团迷雾这是我自己的观感就是这样然后这个当然这边看不到但是你的那个三角形的立体感，你没有第一时间重视它所以这边再2巴掌OK 去领200块。好，再来这一块三角形你大概知道之后呢，接下来看这里这是讲试指的，这是废话吗？这四边也是4边，那每一条线都讲一下，我不讲不重视不琢磨，你就会忽略所以为什么要废话？这个废话一定有它的道理有道理就不是废话。来，这是试指线，这个呢是我们的掌缘手刀的地方这2条线都要特别注意，因为你面对的手掌角度很有可能是以这条线为主，也很有可能是以这条线为主，或者是以这个三角形为主，都有可能。所以如果你不能够分开去注意这几段线条跟这些形状的话，你手掌是不可能精熟到哪的。那会很多新手在练功说这么麻烦，那么复杂，任何技术挖深了都很复杂，所以你们也不能这个就一开始我在啰嗦那个就是为人就是很复杂的你要让它很简单很单纯，我就是这样，就是就像上楼梯一阶一阶的上去，完全无负担，只有考体力，那是不可能的。你要懂很多，因为你想要的是成功，你想要的绝对不是说我就是今天就是默默无闻的在淹没在社会茫茫的人流中，你想要是出类拔萃，那你怎么会觉得未来学一点点就好呢？你一定要学得很复杂的但是我已经把它简化多了所以不用怕那这个呢就是来手心角度那当然你说这个把这个都搬出来看，那整个看一轮的话就是太久了但我们这一次并不会把那些搬出来，但是我就让你们先认识一下手心角度的意思，是指以手掌心这边朝向镜头来说面积最大像这个也是手心角度对不对？都是手心。好，那它的呈现重点当然就是这个四边形，然后不管你的角度有怎么样的偏差，这个四边形就是一定要能够把它的方位定出来然后呢手指头呢从其他角度怎么包过来呢？这个可能到时候上 CP 班的时候呢，你们才会听得再仔细一点这个时候我也只能简单带过手心角度然后另外一个呢叫做手背角度手背角度上个批次是不是有要求你们画那个？有谁义勇军被罚了这个？不是罚，就义勇军画了那个左手跟右手的爱恋，有没有？这个然后我不是也示范了一下吗？来，这个手背角度，当我们手心翻过来就是手背，对不对？好，那换成手背的话呢，我们要注重些什么？你看我非常注重就是这个四边形就我们手心就是手心手背这一块，然后呢往旁边插一块三角状，这个超重要的，对不对？好，然后呢四指线好。掌缘，你们现在感受不到这个掌缘四指线的重要性，因为在手心手背的时候你感觉不到，你就会很直觉的它就跑出来，对不对？好，有可能你去5个角度都比较，你才会知道这2条线有多重要再来要看的是第3种虎口角度，那我稍早在这边讲了很重要的这个三角形凸起来这一块，在虎口角度它就是最主要的了你会发现到这就是虎口角度，有没有？虎口角度看出来这个干嘛吧？弹出去，对不对？这个是什么意思呢？就是以 这一个三角形为主，你有发现吗？你说我们不是有个手掌心？没错，它有一个手掌心，压得很扁很薄，没有错。但是因为是虎口这个镜头角度拍过去，所以呢，你几乎要以这个三角形为主。所以你画来画去，你会发现，只要这个手腕出来，手腕线一切，你只要伸这个三角状伸出来，大概虎口的方式，不管你要让他手怎么摊开，怎么表现什么样的那个手掌姿态，你只要这个三角形能够好好的体现，基本上就过关。所以虎口角度的关键就是在这块三角形，也就是我在这边圈起来这个地方。好，然后呢，另外一个第4个角度呢，就手刀，我就讲到手刀角度，有时候为什么取名就觉得这么土你好记比较重要卖弄比较艰涩的文字，那不是我的风格我要让你记得住，我不要让你这个出去网络上我可以跟人家好像话题上显得高端那有没用过2年就没用过2年你的注意就不会在这如果你假设你的技术没有在这边一直成长越来越厉害，你只能卖弄高深的文字，过2年你的注意就不会在这，因为你没有画好，然后过2年你会注意别的事情所以我不喜欢这样。来，手刀角度呢，就在手心这边的这一条线就是这个掌缘手刀这边，在呈现上呢，它看似比较简单，就是你只要把这个掌缘这一段，因为它毕竟是有厚度有宽度的这一段呢，好好的表现出来，然后不管是你要画什么样的姿态，你就记得手腕一结束，先表现很薄的这个掌缘手刀，然后呢，它会连接小指，再往内推测就是无名指、中指等等。之后呢，再看能不能把远端这一块三角形给伸出来这块三角形呢，就是我们的虎口，它被藏在最后面，因为角度的关系看有没有必要，因为毕竟我们的手是很灵活的要不要再摊开来让拇指跑出来，或者是直接压在底下，真的是完全压成一整片，这个就看动作的需求那以上这4个呢，会是人家认为是很多人会觉得它应该不是最难的，对不对？我并不这么看，我有时候会觉得说，这4个角度都有很难的东西。手的姿势，你握滑鼠，抓手把，然后或者握笔、拿汤匙、拿筷子这些东西，随便挑一个摆上来，它都有它的难度在所以用分析一回事，到时候大家还是要更深入精确的锻炼那这个呢是什么？就是大家可能觉得难度最高，反而在我眼中，我觉得练会了它就一个套路，这个反而比较简单。拳风角度，乍看难，实际上简单。拳风拳风就是以前我教它叫什么拳眼都还发现我讲错了这个角度叫拳风好，来，这个呢就是我们让这个手掌往镜头这边指向过来的时候，这种角度。那其实不管你要做什么动作，在拳风角度的话，在以商业作品，其实它摆的 pose 很少，来来回回就是大概这一些类型。他在画的时候呢，就是把手掌呢压薄成一个扁平状，完全是扁的，就像稍早左上角的那个范例一样然后压扁之后呢，从侧面掌拇指，当然它的三角形你这个时候就看不太清楚了除非它角度有变。然后呢，从斜线地带这个地方，这就是我们的四指线。原本在手心的状态下看是一条线，在这个角度看它是一个薄薄的面。这边呢会有4个地方让你长4根手指出来然后往上食指，然后中指、无名指、小指，就看你到时候你对这个东西的那个更深的理解是怎么样然后呢，在组合上稍早这边示范到的这个三角半圆这个技术，把它组上来，你就能够画一个这个拳风角度纵向的指尖，到时候看你怎么组好，这是一整个 set 这样然后在课堂上，我记得每堂课都会做一些有的没的示范对，这个示范这好像这个题是人家问的就是熟女的跟少女的手掌差在哪？我就用同一个手去做，然后像左边就是做苦力的当然也不是在做苦力，就看那个手有没有又粗又稍也不是胖就不纤细，看那个末端有没有刻意的让它摆的比较就转角转的大一点，然后呢这边把一些第2个呢是把它的这些折角给修掉，让它变得很弧然后呢第3个呢是让它每根手指呢在中间指节处变得非常不明显，完全没有指节感，然后末梢慢慢变尖，这就有点偏少女因为好像上个梯是9梯的同学平日班是这么问 周6班为什么我忘了？因为我要看档案我才知道。我记得这个2个班就一个主轴，但是呢看当下同学的反应，这画的示范的内容也会不一样哦。好，那这个是一个概论啊。OK， 那看了这个概论之后呢，我们来看看我们做一个那个手掌的那个彩图的演练哈。来，现在呢，先把画面先填个简单的颜色哈，然后现在对这个就是这些画笔应该是在这个时候我不会特别去讲哈，因为它毕竟不是正课哈，那就是一个示范，就是这是一个那个硬边笔啊，然后你们实况看多也知道，硬边、柔边这2个是最基本的，对不对？硬边做形状啊，然后柔边做修饰，之后再用特殊笔去抠一些锐利的转折啊。好，那我们现在要做的呢，就是先把皮肤色找到啊，一开始先一个浅色，大部分是偏粉红，然后浅一点颜色，可以测看看哈，有时候你自己在这边看的样本跟画到画面上呢会是2回事哈。我现在要画的手掌呢很普通哦，就是包含刻画在内，我就画一个普通运用频率最高的手掌。为什么讲运用频率最高呢？因为只要任何一个角色，这个叫立会，就是一个角色站着，手自然下垂下摆的时候，大概都会摆这个 pose。就大概手掌就自然下垂就长这样啊。我画一个频率最高的，那接下来呢就不太是结构逻辑，接下来是刻画绘制方法。逻辑部分呢，那个稍早讲的那些，我只是一个概观哈。正课部分会针对每一个角度深入去讲啊。那今天我们不做这个事情。来，用彩图画的时候怎么办呢？观念跟稍早的那个剖析是差不多的哈。来，首先呢是手腕，彩度呢不要太高哈。测一下颜色，来手腕，然后呢画笔之外呢要配橡皮擦，我们用硬边的橡皮擦。好，那你在内心要记得画一条线。我说我内心画一条线什么意思？画到这边呢，先稍微停一下，停个段落。好，再来呢往下伸刚刚的4边形。那因为这个动作呢是有点偏手刀，手刀角度，对不对？来，在我内心呢这条线已经有了。而且呢，这一个4边形也出来了，这个3角形呢也同步被我画上去了。那你说这个撇这一个形状谁知道呢？如果你们用线条练频率太低，你用色块你就没办法感知这件事。但没有关系哈，我把一个感觉先抓给你们。那因为我内心已经有这个3角形了，所以呢，我可以知道说从这个地方出发，我就一定有一根拇指。然后呢，从这个地方我稍早讲了，这个叫4指线，这个4边形往下延伸的这个4指线。因为我内心有这条线啊，所以呢，我可以知道往下呢就是长4根叠在一起的长条状，手指就会出来。那因为它是自然下垂，所以呢，这个手呢，我们当然不可能让它每一根都插的超直，这不可能。一般来讲，自然下垂的时候呢，食指呢会稍微直一点，中指呢会往内拐，无名指呢再往内拐，然后呢，小指呢就看这个人3不3八了哈。正常害羞内敛的人就差不多也是跟着往内，像这样往内拐。3八一点的呢会这样子，不3八就是阴柔一点的哦，这一个小指就翘出来哦。但要看你的角色状态，如果是画那个仙侠类啊或者什么的那个古代仕女的话呢，那就要翘哦，就每个女都要翘哦，除非那个什么阿尚哦，阿尚就说我的那个已经不是把小指翘起来的年纪了，那就不翘了哈。来，因为我内心已经有这条线，我也已经有那几根手，所以我撇一下我就 OK 了哈。你看，我就可以得到一个色块剪影。那当然没有经过刚刚结构讲解的，你就直接这样看这样扯一块，你会非常非常的傻眼这样。因为这个叫学什么？因为我还是解释一下，刚刚结构部分我们有一段并没有，那个是正课才会去讲啊，那个部分没说哈，所以就我刚刚的概观的一个角度，你们去理解啊。就像我刚刚说的，我内心有手腕啊，有手腕线，我内心有这个掌心，有这个3角形啊，然后我有虎口，我有这些结构的观念啊，所以我可以就是色块抹了就有好。好，那抹了就有，再来呢，下个动作呢，还是用这个硬边笔啊， 把这颜色呢稍微加重哦，那就是说就算是我们画的超专注，还是有可能你的格局偏大的时候呢，就会晃神哦。所以我把这几条线呢也稍微加出来，来这个四边形在这，然后我们只画这条线，再来呢这个三角形，我内心已经建立好这个三角形了，那它最重要的线条那个特征呢，就是这个虎口处，这个三角形。好，然后呢，食指呢稍微勾勒一下，你看就这么短的一个范围，这么短的一个范围，你就把它塞进去，把它压得扁扁的，这是做得到的。就是有些新手或者什么，面对一个小范围就不行，我没有办法在这个，我没有办法在这里面这么小的空间，我没办法施展4根手指头，我一定要在一个宽广的环境，我才能够1根、2根、3根、4根，哦，不这样我没办法。这是看你要不要刻意练，逼自己就可以，叠在一起这件事情不难的哦。好，大概就这样哦。这个是做线条分隔，如果你们可能刚刚这个东西看不太懂，那我就加个分隔哦。再来呢，我有一个稍早我讲了一个重要观念啊，就是在你技术稍微成长之后呢，你就要想办法要求自己面对外轮廓，这叫外轮廓。面对外轮廓，你只要观察出它的边缘有转弯，转了弯，那它的那个受光状态，在这个转弯上跟下这2块，它的颜色深浅一定不一样。那观察轮廓旁边只要像这样凸出来，大部分的光都来自上面，大部分啊，不要去考虑那种很偏的啊，就是底光啊什么的，那个不看，先看大部分，大部分东西你都做不到，你考虑那种很偏的，那也是那个就是想太多啊，先想那种最常见的。那所以像这个旁边啊，外轮廓凸出来，那就代表这边要亮亮，好，然后呢，相较之下转了这个弯，转到底下这边就要按下去啊，所以呢，我们很快的把这块弄暗。好，然后呢，这个手背跟这个食指呢，你就看有没有哪里翘起来，如果没有，就全部大家都按。啊，你分隔不清没关系，颜色稍加重一点，再用深一点颜色再分隔一下。好，这个虎口处一定要注意哦。然后呢，这个三角形呢，就有一个传说，越正的三角形越大啊，不知道真的假的啊？然后每一个那个女同学回家就硬把它盯大这样，不用啦。这个也只是传说哈。好，然后呢，当我把这个结构大概这样区分出来之后呢，再来呢，我要用柔边笔来制作哈。我看看哈。好，来这边呢是柔边笔啊，然后我把这个原本的皮肤的调亮啊，然后颜色的亮暗呢，这个是在更基本的课程会去谈啊，大部分后面深入一点的部分都不会讲这个啊。
愚人时代。
就是其实啊，我小时候很少有跟这个同龄的小孩子一起玩的经验，比如说什么躲猫猫啊、溜滑梯这种，好像大家玩就比较不会想到。这种状况就是小时候就有。松一口气，很怕讲错话，是不是？会啦，我会找你玩啊。像是开会啊、创作啊，都是工作。我说玩，一起玩的那种感觉。你讲这样我就很难过了。什么意思？所以对你来说，开会创作不算玩？当然不是啊，绝对不是玩吧？你看你就这样子。老毛病啊？怎样？扫兴？那不算扫兴吧？老毛病，老样子，啊，老屁股。老师好，来老师好，我插一个奇怪的东西在里面。你看，又来了，永远当个扫兴鬼。我装个傻，你也要吐槽。吐槽就是我的工作。你看，又是工作。你要玩，我也可以很认真的玩啊。好啊，你玩啊，好玩啊，来玩啊。你玩。
开车都像摩带大佬子出门一样。转弯是不会打方向灯哦，驾照是用鸡蛋换的，是不是啊？好啦好啦，终于到了，天天都这样塞车，真的是气到血压高。
红绿灯或是123或是木头人啊，
一样东西。123木头人是一样东西。那让你觉得我跟你适合玩什么？
我知道，有一个这个阿鲁巴不要。
知道，想骗我是不是？
好，不然想一个，我玩那个，我想想，那个棉花几月开？
很经典的游戏啊，对啊。但我真的没有玩过。
没关系，
好，那我们来。
那等下我们就从那个去你家找你玩开始。
对，直接开始玩就好，为什么从去我家开始找我玩这个？
就是小时候我就不懂嘛，小时候跟大家一起玩最开心的就是朋友去找你的时候。对啊，
是这样吗？
对，就是体验一下，像那个，喜丹出来玩啊！啊？什么？出来玩啊？什么啦？ 13月啊，哪来的13月啊？这小学没去过吗？November 11月 ，December 12月，考先可13月啊。讲什么？你英文这么厉害，来14月是什么？哪来的14月啦？从13月就没有了。他没有口声。认真一点，认真一点，找个时间点开，这次会不会开？不要，等下我3月就开。不要讲出来。玩嘛，讲出来怎么玩？可以玩啊，怎么玩？啊，搞不好我开了我不抓啊。什么意思？完全没听懂。梅花几月开花？3月开不开？开。那我不抓。不能这样吧？我只是离你很近啊。对不对？但你没碰到。没碰到。对，我离很近，对不对？那为什么不抓？我离很近，我没抓。对。被碰到了。我不是故意的啊。对。好过分，我还是要当鬼。这什么星际版的梅花？不好玩的，谁要玩这种？看扫兴鬼又来了啦！是他的问题吗？你哦什么？你冷静。我只压这边，你的是手会指曲线。奇怪，这样叫好玩。随时会出手啊！太严重了，才会那么严重。随时没有啊，僵尸版是不是？认真一点好不好？你们要跟我玩是不是啊？不要绕回来了。对，段子还是有个收尾嘛。好啦，认真一点啊。好，等一下呢，我们就是有2个版本我不玩，现在玩新的版。啊，对。有人刚刚被打昏战睡了，是记忆力的失睡，可以原谅对不对？可以原谅，他是猴子，对，的确怕，完全严重的，对，的确是。好，你看，不是，你看，怎样？你是不是扫兴鬼？我哪里扫兴？就是扫兴。没有，阿鲁巴版本的梅花你也不玩，星际版的你也不玩，那谁想玩？好啦，那你玩那个啦，综合版的啦。综合版是什么？对啦，5、6、7、8，梅花几月开花？1月开不开？梅花几月开花？1月开不开？不开什么机器？梅花几月开花？1月开不开？好厉害！蓝宝也做得到，好厉害！梅花几月开花？钓鱼也可以。不开。2月开不开？放弃了，还没开，你不要放弃。几月开花？1月开不开啊？睡觉一个，好厉害！梅花几月？2月开不开？说梦话开。梅花几月开啊？睡着。难道睡着了？开，抓！我还有我当鬼，还在玩星际版啊！谢谢大家。好可爱。Commander。好喜欢这个单词 ，Commander。我们把我会去把它拼出来这个样子。对啊，真的，但是旁边那个真的是扫兴鬼。那个扫兴鬼只要一生气就会变啾啾哥哥，你有发现吗？他那个啾啾哥哥已经内化到太严重了，他这个生气的程度变这样。可是真的，他很适合啦，那个静儿很适合就是扫兴哥哥。
2026愚人全新喜剧专场《放鸟未来人》，台北、台中、高雄巡演，购票请上 OpenTix。
很多人学英文的时候都会搞不懂什么时候要加的，什么时候又不能加。比如说你会讲 go to school， 但是又会说 the school is big， 有时候有的，有时候没有的。那这时候很多人最后就只能用 感觉好像在乱选，可是其实这是有规则的，而且你只要知道一个很简单的概念，你就可以马上分辨。所以在这部影片，我会教你一个方法，让你真的搞懂什么时候要用 the， 什么时候不用。首先，如果是日常的这种地点跟活动，我们不会加 the， 像是 school, work, class, bed。例如 Anna is in class right now. Anna 她正在进行上课这个活动 ，class 在这边是指这个活动。或是我说 Brian is at work，Brian 他正在上班，他在上班的这个活动。或是我说 I'm going to bed， 我要去睡觉，是 going to bed 是指我要去睡觉这个，说活动很怪，但是就是我要去睡觉这个行为。那这些日常的活动呢，我们都不会加的。那我当然不会期望你直接用背的，所以我写了3个小故事给你，让你帮助记忆。所以第一个故事，星期一早上在办公室里面 ，Anna 就先说 Brian, you're late. Brian 你迟到了。Where were you？ 你在哪？然后 Brian 就说 Sorry, I couldn't get out of bed. 啊，对不起，我今天没办法起床。I couldn't get out of bed. Anna 就说 Are you okay？ 你还好吗？ Brian 说 I'm fine. I just didn't want to come to work. 我好好的，我只是不想来上班。所以我们先看第一句 I couldn't get out of bed。那这里的 bed 其实不是在讲那张床，而是在讲睡觉这件事情。所以你可以把它理解成我起不来，我不想离开睡觉的这个状态。那什么时候会说 the bed？ 什么时候会加 the？ 如果你在讲一张具体的床，像是如果我说这张床很软 ，the bed is soft。好，再来下面一句 I didn't want to come to work。这里的 work 也是一样，它不是一个地方，而是在讲上班这件事情，上班这个活动。所以我们说 go to work、come to work 都不会加 the。但如果你今天说 the work， 你在前面加一个 the， 那它的意思就变了。The work 是在讲那些工作内容，特定的工作。例如，我可能跟你讲 the work is finished， 那些工作完成了。什么工作呢？就是你跟我可能有讲好哪些，然后我可以说 the work 那些。所以你可以看到 work 加了 the， 意思就变从上班变成具体的工作内容。好，那如果你听到这边，你觉得喜欢我用这种故事的方式来解释文法，我把最常见的英文时态整理成一份时态故事入门包，每一个时态都透过一个故事教你怎么用，让你从故事理解时态的概念，就不用死背。那如果你想这份入门包，你可以到下面说明栏的连结去免费下载，或是就扫描荧幕上的 QR code。好，那现在回到这个故事，我再补一个很多人会搞混的用法，就是跟乐器有关。很多学生会以为乐器跟刚刚那些一样是活动，例如可能弹钢琴啊、弹吉他，所以不加的。但其实不是，我们会说 I play the piano, she plays the guitar。这里一定要加的，因为在英文里，当你说 play the piano， 其实是在讲演奏这个乐器。Go to work, get out of bed, work, class, bed。例如Anna is in class right now. Anna 她正在进行。首先，如果是日常的这种地点跟活动，我们不会加的，像是 school, work, class, bed。例如 Anna is in class right now. Anna 她正在进行上课这个活动 ，class 在这边是指这个活动。或是我说 Brian is at work，Brian 他正在上班，他在上班的这个活动。或是我说 I'm going to bed， 我要去睡觉，是 going to bed 是指我要去睡觉这个，说活动很怪，但是就是我要去睡觉这个行为。那这些日常的活动呢，我们都不会加的。那我当然不会期望你直接用背的，所以我写了3个小故事给你，让你帮助记忆。所以第一个故事，星期一早上在办公室里面 ，Anna 就先说 Brian, you're late. Brian 你迟到了。Where were you？ 你在哪？然后 Brian 就说 Sorry, I couldn't get out of bed。啊，对不起，我今天没办法起床。I couldn't get out of bed. Anna 就说 Are you okay？ 你还好吗？ Brian 说 I'm fine. I just didn't want to come to work。 我好好的，我只是不想来上班。所以我们先看第一句 I couldn't get out of bed。那这里的 bed 其实不是在讲那张床，而是在讲睡觉这件事情。所以你可以把它理解成我起不来，我不想离开睡觉的这个状态。那什么时候会说 the bed？ 什么时候会加 the？ 如果你在讲一张具体的床，像是如果我说这张床很软 ，the bed is soft。好，再来下面一句 I didn't want to come to work。这里的 work 也是一样，它不是一个地方，而是在讲上班这件事情，上班这个活动。 所以我们说 go to work、come to work 都不会加 the。但如果你今天说 the work， 在前面加一个 the， 那它的意思就变了。The work 是在讲那些工作内容，特定的工作。例如，我可能跟你讲 the work is finished， 那些工作完成了。什么工作呢？就是你跟我可能有讲好哪些，然后我跟你说 the work 那些。所以可以看到 work 加了 the， 意思就从上班变成具体的工作内容。好，那如果你听到这边，你觉得喜欢我用这种故事的方式来解释文法，我把最常见的英文时态整理成一份时态故事入门包，每一个时态都透过一个故事教你怎么用，让你从故事理解时态的概念，你就不用死背。那如果你想要这份入门包，你可以到下面说明栏的连结去免费下载，或是就扫描荧幕上的 QR code。好，那现在回到这个故事，我再补一个很多人会搞混的用法，就是跟乐器有关。很多学生会以为乐器跟刚刚那些一样是活动，例如可能弹钢琴啊、弹吉他，所以不加的，但其实不是。我们会说 I play the piano, she plays。
好，再来呢，舰长寿司吧，鞭尸的感觉，不会，编的才会厉害啊，就是要有那种在众目睽睽之下那个承担这个压力，所以你们要是被我挑出来改的哈，不要说怎么办害羞这样，害羞是一个情绪 OK 的，但是你要承受它，你就不会忘记它，不然的话呢，你就是会，就是我们私下来3、5好友聊一下，原来是这个问题原来我在这边画错，2篇你就忘了啦。但是要是像这样子直接在那个类似在讲台上讨论那个错误，就不会忘你顶多未来画不出来，但是还没办法画到很到位，但你不会忘记这个错。打土是不会好，这个呢，我们先这张照片呢它有很多的讯息是被遮住了，好，比如说这个有个缸就是一个玻璃缸遮住了，然后这个地方呢也遮住了，所以呢让舰长判断错误，直接这边就是这样子这里不会是这样我转一下这个又要再谈到一件古老的记忆，这个记忆也没有多古老了8年前、9年前，有一点古老那个这也是我对于画素描这件事情能不能增进你的骨架能力产生的第一次疑问，那个疑问是很深刻的我那时候我退伍第1年，我们刚好跟联成电脑配合的那个时期，然后那个时候台中的老师那个时候我认识一个老师他是那种传统功底很强那种，他会用喷枪，手工的那种你说不是什么画笔 photo 里面哪一支叫喷枪，不是那个东西，是真的传统喷枪。然后他的那个素描底子很好，他就是可以看着照片把它画到一样，他是有这个本事的人那我当然就觉得他画言情风格，那我当然就会觉得说，那应该很多骨架都不是问题。在有一次我办了一个聚会，在台中市火车站前面那个麦当劳，我办了一个聚餐，然后有同学问到他这个动作，就像那个卧佛泰国那个卧佛那个动作，然后让他画出来骨架之后，我看了瞠目结舌，错的有够离谱，所以那个时候我才想，画素描原来无法锻炼一个人的骨架，那个时候我就产生这一个了解，如果你没有锻炼骨架，单纯看着画，你是不会画骨架的这个我已经反复验证过很多人，我已经看了很多人，他就是素描练一辈子，骨架还是不会画，因为你练素描的时候，你不理解你到底你在练什么。你一定要知道你练素描你要锻炼什么，你可能要锻炼观察力，你可能要锻炼你对光影的感知认识，锻炼对形状的掌握，或者你要锻炼你对骨架的了解、体态了解都可以，但是你要知道你现在练你的着重的点在哪里。如果你没有着重的，你只是傻傻的看人家画，你跟着画，人家就是好像画素描很屌然后你跟着画出来，你觉得你也可以很屌，这样想法是错的。绝对都能够练，但你练的当下你要去思考，我看到这个东西为什么他肩膀这么摆，原来是这么摆在这边，原来这个动作肩膀放这里是对的，然后原来它的结构应该怎么样，你要思考这些，不然练都是白练。要思考每一个你在练习的点，切记 素描呢，其实锻炼的点非常的多，但是不能流于你在锻炼的当下，你没有思考，这样就没有用哦。当然，这个一定不会只有素描这样啊，所有的练习都一样，只是素描啊，它省掉一个东西，就是创意这件事情，创造这件事情，你不需要管，因为它东西摆在你面前，不然它就不是我们理解的那个比较普遍的素描概念，对不对？因为你看着画，所以你不用创造它。但是平常时候你像在开一个档案在画的时候，你是要创造它的，所以这个创造的这个动作可以逼迫你去挤东西，从你的脑中，从你所有的技术的仓库里面把东西给挤出来。它的锻炼价值其实是另一个层面。我认为两种未来你就是能够练都要练，只是说时间不够的话，那我个人比较偏重从无到有去画，而不是看东西。看东西是另外一种补足的练习，这并没有褒贬任何一种练习法，这是一种先后次序以及你有多少时间而做的决定。哦，这个你们听听了哈。你时间不够的话，你说每一样练习都要练，那真的也很不实际哦。来，这里怎么样呢？脖子，看这里，这个是舰长的，这是我的，哦。然后呢，这里呢，肩膀这样过来，但是呢，如果你要把它当一个有弹性的东西的话，像这样，肩骨在这，手臂的位置呢，不要把它当直的看，要当弧的看，当一个弧度来看。好，这个时候呢，跳过这只手臂，先不画它，先来搞定身体。身体的话呢，要抓哪里呢？抓肩膀。如果你抓得到肩膀，就抓肩膀；抓不到肩膀，就抓腋下，就抓下颌，把下颌垫那个像这样垫出来啊、哦，一定要垫好这个位置，一定要，你一定可以判断出来。如果你不抓这个位置，你只是想办法从那边慢慢连出来，或者从那边虚抓几下，你这边都是死哦。这都我本来是想要打问号，又想要打叉，就会变成刚刚这个东西啊、哦。一定要点出，把这个下颌位置给垫出来啊、哦。锁骨呢就会出来，然后呢，这个时候呢，我们就可以把这个腋下就可以往这个方向切。我刚刚讲很重要那个三角肌跟二头肌的这个接缝处，这条线切了出来，你身体才有保障。好，再来往下这边，胸腔、腰、臀，我就不看那张照片了，因为我觉得那个照片动作我练过很多遍了。起来哦，然后中线要定好，可以转体没错。来，胸腔朝底下 ，OK， 腹腔朝镜头这边来，所以有经过一个转体。转体就靠中轴线，中间这个轴线去转，靠过来，哦，这样呢就搞定很多了。好，接下来呢，我看一下照片，这里是怎么描述的？哦，没有描述哈，那就是舰长自己想象，对不对？哈，刚好讲错了哈。哎，帅破出现了哈，来，帅破要不要练图呢？你对合掌村姑有没有兴趣呢？一定觉得没你的事，对不对？帅破，你怎么会没有存在感呢？你没有存在感，那老师帮你刷存在感啊，腮帮你刷存在感，来刷一个哈，怒刷一波，来，帅破合掌村姑。这条腿，我就用舰长这个位置啊，伸下来往旁边，当然它也可以就是往正面，哦，要看动作的选择哦。好，这里先不画，我等一下来问这个问题哦。另外一条腿呢，有一个秘密哦， 横切线这边也要做足哦，那横切线要不做足的话哦，一样哦，叫取经四人组哦，送刑具到面前。好 ，BT 也画一个合掌村姑吧。哦，这个合掌村姑呢，看来今天会是个大丰收哦。目前知道就3个要画了，对不对？卡比、绿星、帅破、BT 4大天王啊。合掌村姑的不错啊，那个梗。来看这，好，现在请问一下啊，这条线很重要。这条线呢有2个，我画2种选择给你看啊。看好喽，这条线啊，这是我们的骨关节内侧这个骨关节的横切线。好，它呢是剑长这样，这是选择1，是还是我这样？这是选择2，你们觉得差在哪？1或2，你们挑一个，你觉得哪个对？当然了，现在已经排山倒海了，你会觉得是剑长画错，我的是对的，对哈。看一下这个差异，切在这边，弧度不足，腿会往侧边走。如果像我这样，从这边顶出来，这个会决定中线啊，就腿的中线会决定在就身体中间这边，所以这样子才对。然后呢，因为这个正中间这个凸起的地方呢，比较靠近那个整个我们腹部这边正面这边的话，腿呢它的朝向就比较朝向镜头。好，那我这边用蓝线把刚刚的结果画一下，你看蓝线对不对？这样子，来看一下，如果是像刚刚见的这样子的话，腿呢会朝侧边出去，那旁边这边已经有地面了，所以你朝这边走是死路一条，它是死胡同，你转不出去。如果你今天是朝这个方向，朝偏正面这边，好，腿的中线我们撇一下，这样呢，我们这条腿呢就会往镜头这边，然后膝盖就会看到这个正面，这样后面这条腿呢就可以很舒服的放在地面上，就没事了。所以关键在这里，这个突出，它会引导让你的腿朝向镜头正面这边来，不要傻傻的弄成这样，那是找死哦，跟着舰长一起沉哦。回避太高，谁回避的？谁回避的？女神对不对？小郑，你回避什么？你人生怎么可以回避？第5个画合掌村姑的就是小郑了。小郑，我知道你可以表现很好。你们知道我在改这个时候，我不会看那个嘛，对不对？然后我就这样眼睛一瞥过来，看谁这样像是一个自己作死的那种，我就直接挑他了哈。这样也中。我蛮多人知道我会玩那个就是老游戏啊，特别玩什么呢？就是射击游戏，就是那种弹幕游戏。我为什么要玩弹幕游戏呢？就是比较容易集中精神啊，而且很快就玩完。那你刚刚那个小郑说这样也中。我有时候那个直升机一台，子弹打到这个后面，削到一点点，然后爆掉，我内心也会觉得很干啊，这样也中，我都会中，你也会中啊。好，再来呢就是关键这一块啊，这一块问题在哪里呢？手画直没问题啊，但是我比较推荐是稍微有点起伏。虽然它是直的，但是呢，实际上它的横切线呢，它 会让它在整个空间表面上有一些远近变化。好，然后呢，这个有多弯？因为它这边是照片，所以你看不到它的那个中间的结构。如果他穿上服装，你就会看到可能它会有些袖口什么的弧度会够，这个没有，那就要靠我们自己在做骨架锻炼的时候把这些横线切好。然后一定要记得我并不赞成那个你们在这个阶段画肌肉，画那些什么胸肌、腹肌什么，我觉得那个都不要，好好的把体态就是形而已，外形而已，把体态跟这些结构切线切好，这个比较实际，知道吗？好，再来呢，另一条腿你看这个风骚的舰长还让它翘起来，看优秀。舰长应该不在了然后就一直被我损。舰长要是在的话，应该会出声。好，改完了，看一下这骨架。看看差异吧，像这样跟这样，我就尽量画在差不多位置，除非错的很离谱不然我就尽量画在一起。好，舰长在是不是不好意思我想你是不是沉了这样跟着你的战舰一起沉了这个呢，出错在哪里？你觉得呢？你可以这样子瞬间这样拐弯的吗？不行如果你要画这个动作的话，在能够满足大部分条件不变的情况下，这个肩膀要提高，头的位置就要撇，稍微改一下，然后这个顶的肩膀上提，这个对。好，然后呢，这边不要这样急转弯，就是你还是人就不能这么做慢慢转，当然也不是说转很久才转出来不是这样的，你要把胸腔位置先长度先定好，到这边慢慢的压下来，再转过来，懂吗？然后呢，再来我们来看看横切整个躯体的横切线。如果你要这样子，不是不可以，就是你这个腹部这一条横线，你要这样转可以，但是呢，你所有的线条，包含胸下的话，这大概是我们肋骨位置，线条就不能再往下这么圆，你要把它变平，甚至是有点往上凸。胸部呢就要整个由下往上画，线条走向要这样走，不再是你刚刚这种走法，这样会画不好。开玩笑，这种东西我在练的时候，冰棒一根才2块，好不好？好，那再来呢，这边会出错，出什么错呢？因为你腹部是这样一圈一圈往上顶，这个时候呢，肩膀要挡住脖子，这不是废话吗？你原本的是脖子都要跑到前面来的，就这个叫做什么斜方肌，对不对？会很不明显，会被挡在后面，所以脖子位置可能会在这，然后斜方肌会非常不明显。那怎么那么复杂？人生就是这么复杂就像你开船也一样好，这个身体有没有转体？有转的大了然后给下半身一点空间。屁股出来，再来就是这2条腿了你原本的腿，我觉得你原本这个图直接接上去，我觉得问题就不太大像这个是腿抬起来，所以膝盖先顶出来。看一下这个舰长一定要练会这个，你不可以再这样，不可以，你要让它倾斜一边，有看到吗？整个斜一边，这个日韩腿你一定要会，让整个腿要整个斜一边弯。你内侧这个呢，你要是对称的话，你就永远体会不了这一点。一个直的，一个凸的，创造这种倾斜感，把日韩腿练起来。你 的外轮廓，人物的外轮廓比较不够灵活，所以日韩腿首要先练。练会日韩腿的话呢，你的轮廓就会灵活起来，你的角色就会不也就能 Q 了。好，这个呢往下、往上都可以，因为这个膝盖要怎么弯，这个是都可以的哈。往下当然脚踝就要改，往下。好，然后呢这边呢就有一个免不了的，就是膝盖上这个弧度要很大，像这样。再来这条腿嘞，那就要看动作决定。你可以把膝盖放这里，放这里也可以哈。如果你要放这个位置，跟你原本的这个画起来差异倒是还好。一定要记得，弧度只要像这样由下往上，就是下压上，下面每个结构要往上盖起来。看一下我现在的蓝线，由下而上盖住，这个几乎原本是往下盖，也会被迫由下而上的盖上去。胸部呢由下而上盖住，肩膀由下而上盖住脖子，就是由下而上一圈就往上盖，记得，不然就剥夺你的爵位哈。弧度要够，这是什么横切线？不行啊，这个横切线，好，请你收下那个取经四人组的礼物。这个横切线看一下，要这么弯，粗细可以慢慢再校正。往后再说，看懂了吗？下压上，要下压上，你就是在这边就直接断掉。上面呢，这里你的这个蓝线区的上半身还是上压下，然后呢下半身是下压上，那中间一定会断掉，一定会卡住。那有没有可能有两个都产生？有可能，动作因为人的骨骼是可以弯来。